Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 16. Su Qian's Diary. Today is the 31st day of the 10th month and 37th year. The timekeeping system is confusing. I would be so confused without the host's memories. Based on my calculation, this is the year of the rat. October 18th of the Gregorian calendar will be the day I begin my diary, though how long will I keep up the habit? My uncle is right, I should change my lifestyle. In this dog-eat-dog society, it's best to avoid the top of the social ladder. Many high-ranking officials have had their possessions confiscated due to political power plays. My research says the middle class is the most comfortable. You get to enjoy material wealth without the high-level politicking. Some small bribes never hurt anyone, it was how the middle class made do. On another note, I found a mace of silver today at the markets. October 19th, cloudy day. I need to earn money. In this world, gold is more reliable than silver. Although merchants have no official positions, it is a small price to pay for money. I plan to resign in a few days. A constable's monthly pay of 2 silver taels and 1 stone of grain was too little. At this rate, I will never get to sleep with the Queen of Flowers. October 20th, sunny day. I have decided to wait until I have a stable income from my business before resigning. Today I witnessed a few constables make use of the warrants to extort money from the merchants. It makes me wary, but I understand it is a societal norm. A younger me would have rushed forward and berated the constables, but life has dulled my sense of righteousness. It is important to stay silent when you can't change things. Side note, I found a silver mace in the courts. October 21st, sunny day. Constable Wang brought me to the playhouse. The place has a variety of performances in addition to the sexual services. It is a shame I have to hold onto my virginity for the sake of advancing my martial arts rank. We spent half a day in the playhouse. I saw none that could trump my aunt. Her natural beauty and endowment coupled with her proper manners made her a class above. The women in the playhouse are too frivolous and tainted. Lingyu and my aunt are quite the specimen. Also, I found a silver mace at the playhouse, enough to cover my food and entertainment. Luck has been on my side recently. October 22nd. Spent my time enjoying melodies in the playhouse. October 23rd. Went to the playhouse for their songs. October 24th. Went to the playhouse again. Constable Wang asked why I was so happy. The fair ladies make me happy. October 25th. Su Qian, get a hold of yourself. Have you forgotten your goal? Set a small target, earn 100 million. October 26th. Spent time in the playhouse. October 27th. Visited the playhouse. I didn't find any silver, but I gave money to one of the girls. I should stop visiting places like this. October 28th. This world has gunpowder and guns. They even have soap that works miraculously well, so there goes my plan to sell soaps. I hate the alchemists. Oh, glass. I can make glass that's useful. That'll amaze the people. October 29th. They already have glass. I'll have to think of something else. Today I found my uncle's private stash and helped myself to a silver mace. October 30th. Paid a visit to the playhouse. October 31st. I thought of a money-making tactic today. Daifeng has a rich literary culture. If I can improve the paper quality, it'll make me rich. Then, I'll be able to afford the best food and women. Let me recall the process of paper production. Never mind, let's pass on paper. I have a better idea, cement. The composition of cement is calcium carbonate, silicon dioxide, aluminium oxide and iron oxide. With the right protocol and appropriate ratio, These compounds will form cement. Good. Today I picked up another silver mace in the markets. The frequency of me picking up money from the ground is making me suspicious. November 2nd. The cement plan failed. Theory and practical are vastly different. This is the real world. November 3rd. Used up all my savings, so I went to my uncle. He had no money to lend me. When Susinian found out I was in need of money, he gave me 5 silver taels, but not before expressing his disapproval and mocking me. Beyond the ego and his sharp tongue, Susinian is quite a stand-up guy. I replied with a quote, "If I, Susinian, was not born, Dei Feng would have been in eternal darkness." My cousin left embarrassed. "If it weren't for the fact that we're sworn brothers, I would have thought you were the main female protagonist." November 5th. Today I went with the constables to the tea house to fish for suspects. It was the first time I've listened to a storyteller. Then, the thought occurred to me, what if I wrote down the famous novels that would come to be in the future? I will earn so much money. What a great plan. Another silver mace found today, enough to pay for my trip to the playhouse tomorrow. November 7th. What an idealist. The novels are a few million words each, and I'm supposed to write them down by hand with a brush. Of course, I could produce a charcoal pen, but do I even remember the stories? It's been days and I still have no concrete plans. My head feels like exploding. November 8th, rainy day. The rain reflects my mood. I have bits and pieces of knowledge, but how do I turn them into money? When I think deeper, I realize I lack many skills. Now I have truly witnessed the failings of examination-oriented education. I met my uncle today and he spoke a lot about the courts. He mentioned he had heard of my deeds in the county courts. From his stories, I realized this world is worse than I imagined. Corrupt officials run amok while those who take petty bribes are deemed good. An honest official is rarer than a virgin in the playhouse. November 9th, cloudy day. Why hasn't Lady Kwei from the Imperial Astronomers visited me? Didn't she want to learn the legendary alchemy that could turn salt into silver? The lady is as pretty as Lingyu, a cute, oval-shaped head, and big, captivating eyes. With my experience in courting women, I may stand a chance with her. I just don't want to be discarded by society. It doesn't matter if I'm not a disciple of the Imperial Astronomers. All I want is love. Come find me, I'm running out of hope. November 10th. I was unwilling to let go of the novel writing plan, so I told my sisters the story of the butterfly lovers. Many scenes and details were missing due to my bad memory, but the gist of the story was enough to make Lingyu tear up. Lingyan was unaffected, so I punched her and she cried. At her age, I believe it is appropriate for her to experience some bullying. November 11th. I went drinking with Executively Tipsy. He said the Northern King's daughter was the most beautiful woman in the realm. I asked him how beautiful she was, but he couldn't give a description as he heard it from the county magistrate. After work, I went home and asked my uncle. An odd expression crossed his face, and with his limited vocabulary, he attempted to describe the princess. The gist was, effing huge TTS. Now, my curiosity is piqued. I can't wait to meet this princess. November 12th. To this date, I have accomplished nothing. I am a disgrace to the country and time travelers. November 13th. Today marks my 1-month stay in this world. My salary came in. I have decided to focus on my work. The business can be a side project. November 14th. Visited the playhouse. Chapter 17. Calling out the ant. Whoosh. Su Jian hurled a diamond-shaped stealth weapon from the roof with little care. He was in the inner courtyard of the house. The weapon found its target, the wooden stake, 20 steps away. It was not skill Su Jian had, but luck. There's definitely something wrong with my body, he muttered under his breath. He was too fortunate. For a whole month, he had been finding silver maces left and right, amounting to more than half of his monthly salary. The money could feed an ordinary family of 3 for a month. If they were especially thrifty, it could last 3 months. It was unusual to find mesas of silver everywhere he went. It could not be pure luck. Su Jian knew something odd was at play. System. Come on out, stop playing hide and seek, he called out into the empty air. In the past month, he had tried countless times to wake the system. The silence only confirmed the absence of a system. What was the explanation for the extraordinary luck? In his past life, he had spent a decent amount of money on lottery tickets but never won anything. Who knew his luck would change for the better? He wondered if the luck came at the expense of his life. Su Jian was sure the host did not have such luck. If he did, his aunt would not have picked on him. The exceptional luck would have granted him a blessed childhood. The family would have relied on his silver attracting ability and forego work. An unexplained gift makes one suspicious. Guess I'll just have to watch my steps. Su Jian sighed. It was a rest day. Su Jian leaped over a wall his height and entered his uncle's house for breakfast. The place Su Jian was living in was originally occupied by the Su family's old housekeeper. One wall separated it from the manor proper. After the housekeeper passed away, the place had been vacant until Su Jian took up residency as a result of an argument with his aunt. The host was a stubborn man. He made his own meals every day, though sometimes his uncle would come over with some wine and food. Su Jian did not share the same principles as the host. Sleep was more important than preparing breakfast, and eating out would cost a significant amount of money. His money was reserved for the playhouse, the enchanting melodies coupled with thinly veiled women swaying their hips. Inside the hall, Liu was dressed in a deep red, wide-sleeved robe. When she saw Su Jian enter, she pursed her lips and proceeded to eat her porridge. She did not hail from a prestigious family. Her father had passed the county-level imperial examination, earning the title of a scholar. Liu picked up behaviors from her father and learned to be diplomatic. Her family was recently saved by the unlucky nephew, so she held back her caustic remarks. The nephew had grown into a man of some worth, so she turned a blind eye to his presence. Su Lingyan was standing by a round stool. Her breakfast was placed atop the stool: 3 meat buns, 2 breadsticks, a side dish and a bowl of porridge. Brought, she greeted incoherently with a stuffed mouth. Su Jian glanced around and asked, "Where is Siju?" Siju was Su Zinian's courtesy name. Su Pingzi offered the answer. "He's locked up in his room writing a poem." Su Jian took a seat. Lu Er served him a bowl of porridge, 6 meat buns, a plate of pickled radish and a bowl of soft bean curd. A martial artist at maximum refinement had a large appetite. Once the martial artist reaches the chi stage, his appetite would return to normal, like Su Pingzi's. Su Jian was only half full. He glanced at the little bean and said, "Lingyan, can you give me one of the meat buns?" Everyone at the table observed their exchange. The youngest daughter of the family cared only about food. She would fight anyone who tried to steal from her plate. "No." Su Lingyan stretched her arms wide and guarded her food like an eagle would her chicks. "Come now, I will give you something in return." Su Jian took one of his meat buns and placed it on her plate. He pointed at her plate of meat buns and said, "We both have a share of these meat buns, right?" Su Lingyan scratched her head. "We'll split them equally, yes." Su Lingyan angled her head as she processed the logic, then she nodded. "You get 2 buns and I get 2 buns. Then, I'll give you half a breadstick. Isn't that great for you?" "Yes." Su Lingyan was completely swayed by his words. She smiled happily as if she had won the jackpot. Su Lingyan was speechless. Su Pingzi gave his nephew a knowing look. Liu watched in horror and said, "How did I birth a daughter this stupid? My goodness." Su Lingyan was aggrieved. She had gotten half a breadstick more, but her mother was mad. At that moment, Su Zinian walked in with unfocused eyes. He was mumbling under his breath when he sat down at the table, deep in thought. Liu sighed at her youngest and turned to her favorite son who had a bright future ahead. Little Nian, why are you busying yourself with poetry all of a sudden? One should always play to one's strengths, take the rumors with a pinch of salt. Su Xinian's strength was in essays on contemporary affairs while his weakness was in poetry. Siju, when will you break through and achieve the 8th-ranked Confucianism, cultivation? Su Jian asked. Su Xinian was on the path of Confucianism. The White Deer Academy was founded 1,200 years ago by the very first disciples of Confucius. Getting into the academy was every scholar's dream. Other than the credible foundation and long-standing history, the White Deer Academy was also a place where one could cultivate the ways of Confucianism. The 9th-rank Confucianism was enlightenment. It boosted a person's memory skill and learning abilities but was useless in a fight. Su Xinian shook his head. No progress as of now. My mentor says it requires self-awakening. Perhaps you can look into the enlightenment. How does one cultivate enlightenment? Su Jian asked. Su Xinian recalled his past. Familiarize yourself with the scripture until you know it by heart. Become one with the scripture, then you will have enlightenment. Know the scripture by heart and become one with the scripture. The former required an inordinate amount of time while the latter was subjective. Su Jian nodded wisely. It was similar to the martial artist's refinement stage, which involved many years of mental and physical training. Do you need to train your body to reach the next rank? Su Jian asked. Su Xinian thought for a moment and said, a cultivated Confucian would have no fear in his heart. Every word and action will motivate and encourage others. I'm trying to use the techniques to discourage people from going into the cultivator's path. Any success? Su Xinian pretended as if he did not hear Su Jian and turned to his mother. One of the elders in the academy has taken up an official post in Qingzhou. It is a long journey and the students want to send him off tomorrow with poetry. A frown appeared on Su Xinian's face. I haven't composed my poem. Su Lingyu said softly, you have no talent for poetry. Liu glared at her daughter. Your brother is a talented man who knows the way of poetry. He just prioritized other things. Su Pingzi scratched his head and said, just come up with a few sentences. The ones you recited that day when we found you were good. Su Jian sniggered. Su Xinian scowled and quickly changed the topic. The elder is a well-known Confucian scholar who excels in poetry. The students sending him off are also disciples of poets. I want to pay my respects and try to make connections. Having a good relationship with this elder will be beneficial. Good. Su Xinian was finally getting off his high horse. He was always an arrogant prude who looked down on friendships. He believed in the sayings like, a scholar's friendship is as insipid as water and a scholar makes acquaintances but not companions. After the hardships the family went through, Su Xinian realized the importance of knowing people. As his elder brother and cousin, Su Jian was grateful for the change. The person must be a big shot if Su Xinian was trying so hard to make a good impression. Liu tried to help. What is considered good poetry? Su Xinian replied in mild frustration, a good essay comes naturally on the rare occasion to those who are highly skilled, the same applies to poetry. Then, he continued, if I had known this elder from the literary circles, perhaps our family wouldn't have been sent to jail. Liu's face was scrunched up in sadness. She cared the most for her son's future. A true established Confucian scholar would have a strong, morally upright character. Silvers and gifts meant little. To get into their social circle, one had to prove their worth. Su Pingzi's eyebrows knitted together. You're like your maternal grandfather. He too knew how to write essays but not poetry. Liu shot her husband a challenging stare. Are you saying it's my father's fault? My family is the reason Xinian passed the provincial exam, he takes after me. Lingian takes after you, she still shows no initiative for anything. Su Zinian and Su Lingyu had their mother's enviable looks while Su Lingyan took after their father. The little bean was adorable in a naive way. Su Jian could not stand by and allow his aunt bully his uncle. I disagree. Based on your words, you're saying the Su family has the dumb gene. Liu did not understand what gene meant, but she chuckled. Well, if you had an aptitude for studying, you wouldn't be a martial artist today. If this elder in the academy caught Su Zinian's attention, he must be someone noteworthy. His connections are also my connections. I should lend a helping hand. An idea entered Shi Qian's mind. He flipped through his memories for the poems he learned in school. There must be one dedicated to separation. Poetry writing? All right, I'll have you know every single Su family member is a talent. Su Qian bit down on a meat bun. He wondered if the poem he had in mind would be too good. After all, a poem that would turn up in a textbook centuries later must be exceptional. Chapter 18. Shopping with the Sisters. The core principle of poetry was the usage of level and oblique tones. As long as the same principle applied, Su Qian's 9 years of education from the future would give him an edge. Su Zinian glanced at Su Qian and raised his chin. A bird in the sky, a worm on the ground, the bird swooped down, the worm flew up. Su Lingyu covered her mouth as she giggled. Su Qian glared at her and she looked down, her cheeks pink. I want to punch him for spitting such poison. Su Qian gritted his teeth. The poem was written by the host when he was 10 years old. That year, his aunt's father had come to teach the children the basics of literature. The topic of poetry was touched upon and thus the ridiculous poem was born. Liu said mockingly, Ninjian, not that I want to look down on you, but the Su family only birthed one scholar and that is little Nian. You and your uncle's penmanship can be equated to a squiggly worm. You want to craft a poem when you can't produce a legible writing. She pursed her lips and rolled her eyes as a noble woman would. Su Pingzi coughed awkwardly. Ninjian, let's not interfere with the scholar's affairs. Today is an off day, let's train in the courtyard. His words were a discouragement to Su Qian, effectively telling him to stay out of the scholar's business lest he embarrassed his uncle. Su Qian said nonchalantly, 1,000 miles of yellow clouds darken the day. His aunt rolled her eyes and ate her porridge. His uncle wiped away the stains on his youngest daughter's lips. Su Zinian frowned. A single sentence was not poetry, but he was surprised Su Qian could come up with such a proper 7-character sentence. The north wind stirs the geese and snow. The line evoked a strong imagery in Su Zinian's mind. He was stunned. Su Lingyu raised her head. Her soulful eyes were transfixed on her cousin. Su Qian picked up his bowl of porridge and kept his lips sealed. What's the continuation? Su Zinian asked. This was akin to a storyteller stopping at the climax of the story, a cliffhanger for everyone at the tea house. Tune in for the next episode to know more. It was incredibly frustrating. I don't know how to compose poems. Su Qian threw a fleeting look at his aunt. She was a dignified woman with no intentions of apologizing. Liu's animated eyes widened as she turned to Su Zinian and asked, Is the poem good? Su Lingyu replied softly, It has an artistic flair to it. She had limited access to education, but she could tell the poem was superb. Su Pingzi was surprised by his children's responses. He turned to look at Su Qian with a glint of hope and expectation in his eye. Su Qian chewed on his breadstick and effortlessly recited the last 2 lines of the poem. Fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm. The chopsticks in Su Zinian's hand fell onto the table. He repeated the lines and felt himself being enchanted by the poem's meaning. Su Lingyu shuddered as goosebumps appeared on the back of her hand. Su Pingzi bit his lip and said, Man, the poem gave me the chills. Liu was in concordance with her husband, but a part of her still disapproved of Su Qian. Poetry could elicit a reaction even in those outside the craft. One did not need to know about the level and oblique tones to appreciate the beauty of a poem that had been passed on for centuries. Su Jian understood their wonderment as he was once similarly taken aback by the rich poetry that filled his language textbook. 1,000 miles of yellow clouds darken the day. The north wind stirs the geese and snow. Fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm. Su Zinian rose from his seat as a red blush colored his cheeks. The color made the handsome young man look charming. The poem was exceptional. Although poetry was not his strong suit, as a scholar, one was inclined to drink and wax poetic with other scholars. Good poetry would get them hammering a beat and rhythm as they sang passionately. When did you learn to compose poems? Su Zinian stared at Su Jian with bright, curious eyes. Su Jian chuckled and said, I never said I couldn't. The poem from 10 years ago cannot represent my skills today. I've always had talent for poetry but I never showcased it. So Ninjian was scholar material. If I had known, I would have sent you to study and Siju to martial arts lessons, Su Pingzi said with a grin. His wife was unhappy with the situation but could not think of any smart retorts. No, if that had happened, none of us would have succeeded in life. Su Jian knew the host was a horrible student who would rather do hard labor. Su Zinian also had no talent for martial arts. He was a delicate and frail boy who would not be able to handle the strenuous physical training that occasionally even involved weapons. Well, Ninjian wrote this poem. Siju, I'm sure you'll come up with your own. Copying is not a scholar's way, Su Pingzi said. Su Zinian let out a huff, annoyed that his father thought he would plagiarize. He turned to Su Jian and said, Can I borrow your poem? I will name you as the poet. More like the plagiarizer. Su Jian nodded. Go on, show it off. A scholar's work had to be witnessed and acknowledged by others. Su Jian had intended for Su Zinian to use the poem to impress the Confucian elder. He cared not about who gets the writing credits. Su Jian was not a scholar, so the poem was not useful to him. It was also why he did not use his literature knowledge for the past month. His working environment was not suited for poetry. He spent his day with a bunch of sword-wielding, gun-toting constables. Reciting poems to them was useless, he might as well teach them to sing the Lasso Boy. The title of the poem? Su Zinian asked. Su Jian froze. He had forgotten the title. This poem is from my heart and has no name. Just speak it as such. When breakfast was over, Su Zinian came out from the backyard with his father's favorite horse and rushed off for the farewell. Uncle and nephew engaged in sparring in the courtyard. Good. Your moves have improved. The next step would be Qi training. Qi requires the heavens and earth to interact for its birth. Su Pingzi took the towel offered by the servant and wiped his sweat. Besides a herbal bath, you'll have to find someone with 7th rank divinity to open Heaven's Gate. Else, you will never be able to unlock your Qi. Divinity was the 7th rank in the path of a martial artist. Su Jian wiped his forehead and asked, Uncle, what are you saying? After the Battle of Shanhai Pass, my sacrifice and merit earned me a favor from the army's expert who opened the Heaven's Gate, allowing me to enter the realm of Qi. A year after the battle, I had Zinian, Su Pingzi sighed. The world today is peaceful, hence there'll be less chance for you to prove your worth. How will you achieve Qi training? Will you not marry and build a family? Ninjian, I'm getting old. My only wish is to see you married with children, only then will I be able to face your late father. One step at a time, uncle, Su Jian replied half-heartedly. Other than earning merit and proving his worth, money was also a viable option. The herbs and the expert could be bought with money. The imperial courts had strict control over the numbers of martial artists as they could use their skills for crime. The laws dictate the 7th rank divinity experts were not allowed to open the Heaven's Gate for any random person. They had to report to the courts even if they were doing it for their son. However, The moral fabric of Daifeng was thin at that time. Corruption was rampant among the officials and the imperial court's power wanes with each passing day. While no one dared to break the law in broad daylight, several experts offered their services in the black market. Su Qian just had to make enough money the silvers would be equivalent to a meritorious deed. Otherwise, he would forever be stuck in the refinement state while his penis wilted away. His aunt brought her daughters over. They stood under the roof of the corridor. The sun is out today, why don't you take Lingyan and Lingyu out to the markets? Su Pingzi frowned. I have something on. Isn't today a rest day? I'm meeting some colleagues soon. How about Ninjian take them out? The daughters of families with a literary reputation were closely guarded and not allowed to roam as they pleased. The Su family was a martial arts family, therefore the sisters' upbringing was not as strict. Su Qian turned around and met the clear and bright eyes of his teenage cousin. Appearance-wise, Su Lingyu had surpassed her mother and more. She chewed her lip and looked away shyly. He nodded and said, I have nothing on anyways. I once brought a 16-year-old girl out shopping in my previous life. I was in my prime at the age of 18. Of course, the girl in my memories is not comparable to Su Lingyu. A 7-character quatrain is a form of poetry. Chapter 19. A Farewell Poem. In the countryside of Jingzhou City, there stood a pavilion named the Sheep's Pavilion. A few elaborative carriages were parked beside the pavilion. The winds were cold and harsh in the countryside. The distant mountains were swathes of brown against the blue sky. The sun was high in the sky, providing the much-needed warmth in the early winter days. Xiang's layman of the White Deer Academy was leaving the city for an official post. It was great news for the academy, especially when it had been losing clout in the courts. The mentors drummed out a rhythm and sang while the students danced merrily. The air was filled with excitement as each and everyone looked forward to a day they would be on the receiving end of such a celebration. In the pavilion sat 3 elders who were drinking tea. The man with a long, white beard dressed in a purple robe was the guest of honor. The man was Yang Gong, courtesy name, Ziqian, art name, Xiang's layman. In Yuanjing year 14, he was the top scorer in the imperial examination. However, he retired from his post just after 1 year of service and went back to the White Deer Academy. He spent 22 years there learning and teaching. He had students from all over the world and became an established Confucian scholar. Nevertheless, he should have had a better future. Not long after he entered the political arena, he suddenly departed from the courts. There had been many rumors when that happened. Some said he offended the emperor, and thus was ejected from the courts. Others said he offended the Grand Secretary of that time, who was known for using cruel tactics, therefore he packed up and left. Regardless of what happened in the past, Yang Gong was back in the courts after 22 years. He was elected as King's provincial administration commissioner. He was a high-ranking official of the border. The 2 other men beside him were also noteworthy. They were well known even beyond the White Deer Academy, and their fame was on par with Xiang's layman. Li Mubai was the man with the goatee in a grey robe. He once had the art name, Chess Master. 5 years ago, he lost a 3-round chess game with Wei Yuan and flipped the chess table. Since then, he no longer played chess. The one in a blue robe was Zhang Zhen, a military strategist. He was the author of the 6 Swords of War, a compulsory reading for Daifeng's military officials. He was the only military strategist in Daifeng who could stand toe-to-toe with Wei Yuan. Outside the pavilion stood a group of students who were there for the send-off. They were the cream of the crop that was the White Deer Academy. Su Xinian was among them. Mentor Xiang is finally given an administration role. If we can impress him, surely it'll be good for our future in the courts. A friendly peer asked, Siju, have you prepared a poem? My brother gave me a poem, technically half a 7-character octave. Su Xinian stared at the pavilion and said, I have an incomplete draft. Yangshu, you've outdone yourself. The 7-character octave had a strict format. The number of characters had to be uniform for all 8 sentences. 2 sentences formed a line, making 4 lines in one stanza. The poem Su Jian recited only had 2 lines, half a stanza. After breakfast, Su Zinian had tried to pry the remaining half of the poem from his cousin, but the man avoided the topic. No. Knowledge is as vast as the ocean, one has to put in the effort to make a boat, just as how we need to impress our elders for a better future, the friend said. Knowing Su Zinian was not well versed in poetry, he refrained from asking more. Yang Shu is right. Corruption is common in the courts these days. The low-level officials cooperate with the high-level officials to milk the commoners, even with the increasing frequency of disasters. To make changes, one has to adapt to the ways. Another student chimed in. Yang Shu nodded and turned to Su Zinian. You've always looked down on poetry, but it is the one thing that can last centuries. Your essays will be forgotten after a decade or two. Poetry is a minor subject. It can't be used for governance, nor can it improve the lives of the common. It is merely a stylistic art form. Su Zinian swallowed his words as he was about to use said stylistic art form to impress an elder. He gave them an incoherent response. Yang Shu was surprised to find no retaliation from Su Zinian. The national chess player, Li Mubai, said, Brother Yang, if you had half their wits, you wouldn't have wasted 20-odd years of your life. Zhang's layman smiled. That's incorrect. The military strategist, Zhang Zhen, said after taking a sip of his tea, Brother Yang was ambitious and he followed fate's plan. At that, Zhang's layman spoke, in the end, I was pushed out of the courts. It wasn't your fault. Those from the Imperial College were always dead set against the White Deer Academy. The empire is ruined within 200 years because of those power-hungry bastards who only know how to please the top and squash the bottom. The statement had to do with an interesting piece of history. The source of Confucianism was the sage, Confucius. The White Deer Academy was founded by the sage's disciple, a proper linkage to Confucius himself. 200 years ago, due to a power struggle in the courts, the White Deer Academy was hated by the then emperor. At that time, the White Deer Academy had a traitor in their midst according to those who hailed from the White Deer Academy. The traitor was once a mentor in the academy and he took this opportunity to set up his own faction. He pleased the then emperor with his plan to stay true to heaven's wish and exterminate mankind's sin. With the emperor's support, he created the Imperial College and became its first-generation scholar. The Imperial College took over the role of the White Deer Academy as the main delivery organization for the imperial courts. Thus, the Confucians have been fighting for legitimacy in the past 2 centuries. Zhang's layman said in a low voice, my journey to Qingzhou will be the first in many years. I will lay the groundwork in the courts and revitalize the academy, but I cannot work alone. The academy requires assistance from my peers and the talented young. Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen exchanged a smile. Zhang Zhen scanned the crowd of students. Does anyone wish to recite poetry for the guest of honor, Zhang's layman? A poetry recital must have a prize, else there is little meaning. Zhang's layman retrieved a purple jade from his waist and said, the winner will get this piece of jade accessory. The purple jade was a rare find. The students congregating outside the pavilion were enchanted by the jade accessory. The accessory was blessed with the scholar's luck and wisdom. The person who received it would undoubtedly be blessed with good luck. The gift had another meaning. An elder's personal accessory was only given to his juniors and students. Whoever received the purple jade would be considered Yang Gong's student. I volunteer to recite a poem for Zhang's layman, said a man dressed in a green Confucian shirt. The jade accessories glimmered around his waist as he walked out of the crowd. He folded his sleeves in greeting. Li Mubai smiled. This is my student, Zhu Tuizi. He has some poetry skills. Zhang's layman smiled and gestured for the student to begin. When the student named Zhu Tuizi was done, A satisfied smile was on Xiang's layman's face. Good, said the military strategist. He refrained from saying anything more as the two other scholars were much better at poetry than him. A good start did not guarantee a good end. The subsequent poems were a far cry from good. The difference was stark. The poems that came after the first students were barely passing the standard. Li Muibai said with a sigh, ever since the Imperial College prioritized the writings of the sages, the students have all been clinging tightly onto the essays and scriptures. Stay true to heaven's wish and exterminate mankind's sin. Sooner or later, we will descend into a world of shackled and unimaginative poetry. Literature will no longer capture a person's soul. The words were tinged with sadness. It was the reason behind the diminishing powers of Confucianism. 200 years ago, the Confucians' famous quote was, "Buddhism is great, Taoism is great, sorcery is great. Wizardry and witchcraft are amazing too." Well, martial artists are not among the civilized ranks. They can leave with the monsters and non-humankind. Now, I say to all of you seated, you're all trash. Yes, the Confucianism of 200 years earlier was that conceited. Fast forward 200 years, every other discipline treated Confucianism as an annoying little sibling. The Confucians were understandably unhappy about the turn of events. Xiang's layman sighed. Let us move on from this topic. Any student who wishes to recite their poem, stand up. There was silence. Zhu Tuiza stared at the purple jade. At this stage, he was confident it would be his. I have a poem. Su Xiannian stood and approached the pavilion. He had bided his time as he was a low-profile scholar who did not wish to upstage his fellow peers. It most definitely had nothing to do with the fact that he and Zhu Tuizi had once engaged in a heated argument. Chapter 20. Half a stanza to surprise the established Confucian scholar. The military strategist who was bad at poetry introduced his student. Su Siju, my student who excels in the art of war. He is a promising scholar. Zhang Zhen kept his surprise to himself. You're not a poet, why have you volunteered yourself? Zhu Tuizi had thought the purple jade belonged to him when a student called out. Warily, he sized up the competition. However, when he saw that it was Su Xinian, his confidence rose again. Zhu Tuizi only spared Su Xinian a glance. They were classmates for years. Although they rarely interacted, they were aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses. Su Xinian was skilled in composing essays that discussed contemporary affairs, he also had a good grasp of military strategies. Poetry was not his strong suit. The jade accessory was Zhu Tuiza's. All eyes fell on Su Xinian as he basked in the attention. His eyes were far away, staring into the soft glow of the sun. 1,000 miles of yellow clouds darken the day. The national chess player, Li Beimu, stroked his white beard. The simple sentence was meant to set the scene, but the words resonated in his chest. It was almost winter. While snowfall had not begun, it was only a matter of time before the weather changed. There was no hyperbole in that sentence. The imagery appeared in everyone's mind. The setting sun was blocked by a flurry of snow as the north wind roared. The sky was dotted with flying geese. The two sentences painted an image befitting a farewell. Zhang Zhen was surprised. In his many years of observing Su Xinian, the student showed little aptitude for poetry. These two 7-character sentences must have taken a lot of effort. If the whole poem was of this quality, Su Xinian might outperform Zhu Tuizi. Among the 3 established Confucian scholars, Xiang's layman was the most skilled in the art of poetry. He ruminated on the words and felt sorrow in his heart. 1,000 miles, the sunset, the north wind, the flying geese, the flurry of snow. The setting was one of loneliness and desolation. The poem sounded as if he was being banished, not promoted, and yet there was a certain charm in its sorrow. His past achievements were acknowledged by the courts, therefore he was assigned to Qingzhou. However, Would the powers of the Imperial College allow him to grow and prosper in the courts? Would they stand by and watch as he built a foundation in the courts for the White Deer Academy? An unknown fate awaited him in Qingzhou. The path ahead was uncertain. Then, Su Zinian spread his arms apart. His handsome face glowed under the warm rays of the sun, unmarred and delicate. With his arms wide open, he looked at Xiang's layman and recited loudly. Fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm. A hush fell over the pavilion and its surroundings. A chill swept through the audience. Zhu Tui's head turned stiffly to look at the erect Su Zinian. Fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm. Li Mubai applauded loudly. Exceptional. The first two sentences evoked sadness, then the last two sentences changed the mood and lifted everyone's hearts and spirits. Zhang Zhen kept his eyes on Su Zinian. Xiang's layman was still caught up in the beauty of the poem, his heart was moved. A good one, really impressive, he mumbled. The military strategist saw that his student did not continue his recital and asked, "What about the next half?" A smirk tugged at Su Zinian's lips as he replied, "The poem exists in only half a stanza." Only half a stanza. The scholars were wide-eyed at the statement. This man performed a half-written poem. No matter, no matter. Half a stanza was sufficiently impressive, Xiang's layman said calmly. He wore a cheery smile as he asked, "Su Siju, does this poem have a name?" No. Su Zinian maintained his proud demeanor in hopes to avoid their questions. His reluctance to elaborate would discourage further questions. The smile on Xiang's layman's face widened. No rush. This poem was meant for my farewell, right? Su Zinian nodded. Why don't I name it for you? Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen realized what he was doing and frowned as if they both tasted a lemon slice. How about Yang Gong's farewell to Qingzhou at the Sheep's Pavilion? The elder looked expectantly at Su Zinian. Satisfactory. Su Zinian called out. Noticing his lack of respect, he added. As you please. The two elders beside Xiang's layman made sounds of disapproval. Shameless thief. Tisk. It is fate. Xiang's layman laughed heartily as he bowed at them with his hands folded. In an era where poetry was a dying art, this poem would be revolutionary. It would be sung by every student and scholar of the realm. The name of Xiang's layman was bound to the poem's title, and thus would be known throughout the lands. If the poem survived the ages, his name would also be passed down generations and generations. The quality of the poem made it highly likely to be well received by all. The two elders had called him shameless because Su Zinian was presenting this poem as a gift to a mentor. Technically, a courtesy name or art name should be used instead of a given name in the poem title. A given name should only be used in poems about one's peers and close friends. Evidently, the man was too caught up with fame to feel the shame. What was every scholar's dream? To cultivate oneself and bring peace to the empire? No, that was an ideal. Throughout the ages, every scholar's biggest dream was to have their name carved into history. The two elders were incredibly jealous. As Su Zinian's mentor, Zhang Zhen had some doubts about the author of the poem, but he stayed silent. He was happy for his student to receive praise from Xiang's layman. As the three elders discussed, Su Zinian coughed to get their attention. Respectfully, I must declare that the poem is not my work. The discussion stopped. The three esteemed scholars wore different expressions: surprise, shock, and understanding. Li Mubai was surprised. Xiang's layman had the largest reaction. He took 2 steps forward and asked, "Who is the author? Is he from our academy? Is he here?" He looked past Su Zinian as he scanned the crowd. Su Zinian lifted his chin and said proudly, "It is my elder brother." A chatter began among the student body. Su Siju's brother. Where does he study? I've never heard of him. If I remembered correctly, Su Siju is the eldest of his family. Siju, What is your brother's name? Who is his mentor? Tell us. A poet of this caliber yet unknown to the academy. The students were eager to hear about this mysterious poet. The three elders watched Susinian. Ah crap, I've been badly influenced by my father's impulsiveness. I shouldn't have revealed the existence of my impulsive brother. The eagerness in the student's eyes made Susinian rethink his decision. To be a scholar was to be the top of society, as shown by the haughty Susinian. Those from the White Deer Academy were no exceptions. If Su Qian was a scholar, these people would sing praises and laudation. Revealing the poet was a constable would give rise to a negative reaction. If a lowly constable could write such an exemplary 7-character poem, what of the scholars? Susinian pushed through with his explanation. My brother, he studies the scriptures at home and doesn't attend the White Deer Academy or the Imperial College. He is a simple man who doesn't want fame and prefers to be left alone to his works. Such dedication was praiseworthy. The White Deer Academy students were pleasantly surprised as a gush of friendship filled their hearts. Unsurprisingly, the purple jade was presented to Susinian. Xiang's layman bid the crowd farewell. In a burst of inspiration, he left them with a line before he entered the decorated carriage. Talents cannot be covered in dust, speak carefully in such times of peace. What do you say? The two other elders gave no response. Perhaps they understood but pretended not to. The crowd watched as the carriage ferried Xiang's layman away. After some time, Li Mubai tapped Susinian on the arm. The two men stepped aside to have a private conversation. Siju, I suddenly have the urge to take in a disciple. If you are free today, can you introduce me to your brother? Zhang Zhen appeared and quickly said, Siju, wouldn't it be great if you and your brother were under my tutelage? It did not matter if the man wrote any more poems. The main goal was not to let the talent be buried. Perhaps the future had a famous poem titled, My Mentor, Zhang Zhen. Li Mubai argued, military strategy is not the main branch of study. Every scholar has to start with the scriptures, essay composition, and self-cultivation. Oh? And chess is a main branch? A mentor who can't take a loss and has never won against Wei Yuan. Zhang Zhen taunted. Shut your mouth, you old thief. Don't mention Wei Yuan in my presence. I have always cherished my talents, this student is mine. You old fool, you just want him for his poetry skills. Shameless. Watch me strike you down with my noble spirit. As if I can't do the same. Susinian's head was heavy. The students who stood a distance away were in shock. The two established Confucian scholars were red-faced as they argued. It looked as if a fight was about to break out. Chapter 21. Bullies in the Ancient Times. At the end of November, the temperature in Jingzhou City dropped below zero. That fact was established when Su Qian woke up one morning and saw the frozen layer of ice in the water jars out in the courtyard. Dai Feng's imperial family was located prominently in the central plains of ancient China. The weather in Jingzhou City was akin to the temperate monsoon climate regions of modern-day China. A winter without heating in these temperate regions would be a difficult affair. It was common for people to freeze to death in the winters during this era. It's simply fate's doing, Su Qian thought and sighed. He lamented his weak grasp of mathematics and chemistry. In this primitive era, he could have contributed to mankind's advancement and brought comfort to the common folk. The sun was high in the sky. The teenage girl held hands with her 5-year-old sister as they walked through the rowdy marketplace. Bright eyes flitted from left to right as the girls took in their surroundings with smiles on their faces. The teenage girl was in a jade silk dress, flowers bloomed romantically across the sleeves. The broad sleeves fluttering in the wind made Su Lingyu look magical. Women in traditional clothing rarely appeared in Su Qian's mind. The clothing of this era was more conserved than the traditional clothing he was familiar with. A thought crossed his mind, perhaps I could earn money altering clothes? I'll make them more attractive. Images of revealing clothing from the future, black pantyhose and garter belts, flashed through his mind. Stop! I will be executed for this. The streets were littered with rumbling horse carts that carried loads of produce and supplies. Stalls were set up in rows while people crowded in every nook and corner. It was a classical depiction of a traditional marketplace. The past month had changed Su Lingyu's opinion about her cousin. She no longer treated him like an outcast. Previously, the host had a strong dislike for the siblings and aunt. Pleasant interactions were reserved for his uncle and the youngest sister. Su Lingyu's calls of big brother had been repeatedly ignored in the past. Therefore, she only nodded in greeting. Their relationship had improved from then, but the awkwardness was still present. Hand in hand with her younger sister, Su Lingyu made sure to keep a distance from Su Jian. The little bean's attention jumped from one thing to another, but her impulsiveness was tamped down by her sister's strong grip on her hand. Candied fruits, candied fruits. Su Lingyan pointed at one of the vendors and shouted. Your teeth are rotting, said Su Lingyu. She tugged her sister away from the vendor. The Su family was going through a tough period. They were hard-pressed for money in the past month, so Su Lingyu had no copper coins to spare for her sister. Su Jian trailed behind the sisters. He watched the elder sister walk with her head held high, full of youth and grace. Su Lingyu was at the cusp of adulthood. She did not possess a woman's curves, but her youthfulness, unique to girls of this age, was charming in its own way. The little bean fought her sister's grip and turned around. Big brother. Su Lingyu bit her lip. A frown was forming on her forehead. I don't have any silver on me, but give me a moment, Su Jian soothed the young girl. Suddenly, he felt something hard under his soul. He looked down and spotted a broken piece of silver. He collected the broken fragment and examined it. It was money. In the past month, the rate at which Su Jian found silver maces was abnormally high. Su Lingyu's eyes widened. He found another piece of silver. Yes. I can go to the playhouse today. Su Jian had not visited the playhouse in 2 days because he ran out of money. Happy with his find, Su Jian went to the vendor and said, Give me 3 candied fruits. A broad smile graced the vendor's tan face as he served them. There you go. That'll be 6 copper coins. The silver fragment could not be broken down further, so the vendor went to a nearby store to exchange it for some copper coins. He kept 6 copper coins for himself, and the remaining 94 coins were tied up with a thread for Su Jian. Daifeng's monetary system was as follows: 1 silver tael could be broken into 8 maces or 1,000 copper coins. Gold was a luxury item that existed outside the official monetary system. Most common folk lived their whole life without encountering gold. Su Jian took the copper change and the candied fruits. He bit down on one stick and gave the others to his sisters. Su Lingyu politely received the snack and said, Thank you, brother. She bit down on the candied fruits and savored the sweetness in her mouth. Her eyes crinkled in happiness, a sight that would melt any boy's heart. Su Jian nodded and looked at the youngest girl. She was also chomping down on her candied fruits. Brother. Is yours sweet? Su Lingyan mumbled with her cheeks stuffed. You want to have a taste? Su Jian had an inkling of his sister's plan. You read my mind. Su Lingyan was surprised her brother knew what she wanted. Su Jian let out a huff and said, Eating too much candy will give you cavities in your teeth. What are cavities? The little bean asked out of curiosity. After a moment's thought, Su Jian said, Worms that are plump, white, and slithery. He glanced at Su Lingyan and found her licking her lips and swallowing her saliva. Defeated, Su Jian folded his hands and presented her his stick of candied fruits. Su Jian followed his sisters through the busy streets of Jingzhou City, his mind too occupied to appreciate the sights passing by. I found another piece of silver. The probability is uncanny. As a police academy graduate, he did not believe in coincidence and luck. Is it related to the crossover? Before he came to this world, Su Jian did not remember touching any ancient artifact or being cursed by a mysterious old man. Do I have the golden touch? A silver mace a day, just enough to pay for a visit to the playhouse. Is this fate telling me to spend my days in the playhouse? I should focus on my martial arts training. For now, the extra money is beneficial and I haven't noticed any downsides. I'll observe if there are any changes when I enter the Qi rank. Thus far, I haven't witnessed the peak of this world's martial arts. Perhaps when I'm stronger, I'll be able to uncover the meaning behind my luck. Su Jian remained cautious of the unexplainable luck. If there was a system in place, he would be less wary. Along the street, there was a third-grade pleasure house called Guo Tower. Su Jian had extensive knowledge of pleasure houses thanks to Constable Wang. He was also educated and enlightened by his peers. The naming convention of the pleasure houses indicated their grades. The first and second grade pleasure houses were called courts, houses, or plazas. The third and fourth grade pleasure houses were called rooms, towers, and parlors. It was not yet noon but the ladies of Gi Tower were already working. Several ladies in red and green were perched on the second-floor balcony, smiling and waving at the passers-by. One of the ladies in silk waved her colorful handkerchief and called out sultrily, "Dear sir, come join us for a drink." Entering a third-grade pleasure house required an entrance fee of 2 silver maces to cover for drinks. The cheapest lay ranged between 5 to 6 silver maces while the better ones cost 1 to 2 silver taels. Su Jian felt his pockets and confirmed he was too poor for the pleasure house. He only had a few silver taels to his name. Staring at the beautiful women on the second floor, he brandished a poem. Green-robed and young, I rode my horse gallantly across the bridge as the red handkerchiefs danced from the towers above. He was depicting every man's dream. Su Lingyu said impassively, "Brother, you should use your talents appropriately." She recited the poem in her mind and mentally sighed. Perhaps her father was right, her eldest brother was the scholar of the family. A childish voice said, "Brother, the girls are so pretty." Su Jian replied, "They have to dress well for work." "What work?" "They sell newspapers." "What?" Su Lingyan's eyes glimmered with curiosity. She stared up at the women on the second floor, unwilling to leave. "Brother!" Su Lingyu shrieked. She was upset that her brother was discussing such immoral things with their youngest sister. Su Jian gave her a look. "What are you mad about? Did you get my humor?" The group moved on from the pleasure house but was stuck at a meatball shop down the road. Su Lingyan was rooted on the spot, drunk on the delicious smell of meat. Su Lingyu glanced at the shop as saliva filled her mouth. After the missing tax money incident, the Su family could only afford fish and meat once every 3 days. Her appetite had grown as she was going through a growth spurt. She especially craved for meat. "Wait here, I'll buy some for both of you." The shop was small but business was good. Su Jian squeezed through the crowd while the sisters waited on the side. "Big brother is a nice person," Su Lingyan said after gulping down a mouthful of saliva. She turned to look at her sister. Su Lingyu was staring at Su Jian, a hint of a smile tugged at her lips. Soon, Su Jian was holding 3 portions of fish balls and meatballs neatly wrapped in grease-proof paper. When he turned around, he saw 5 followers of a nobleman gathered around Su Lingyu. There was no physical contact but it seemed like they were taunting her. The 16-year-old girl looked like a startled deer. She tried to get away but could not break through the circle of men. She was on the brink of breaking down, terror plastered on her face. The men laughed at her misery. A short distance away, a young nobleman in an embroidered robe sat above his horse. He watched the scene attentively. Wanting to save her bullied sister, Su Lingyan ran toward the nobleman. Her assault was a loud, unrestrained shriek. A nuisance. The nobleman raised the horsewhip but thought twice. A cruel glint appeared in his eyes as he tugged on the reins, causing the horse to rear up on its hind legs. The horse was about to crush Su Lingyan. Su Lingyu let out an ear-shattering scream. Chapter 22. A lesson for the young nobleman. A ball of rage erupted from Su Jian's chest. As the horse reared up on its hind legs, he whipped out the string of copper coins and hurled it at the beast. The attack was quickly followed by lightning footsteps that broke the pavement. 72 copper coins were scattered in the air around a young nobleman dressed in an embroidered robe. The nobleman made no move to dodge the attack. He still had that entertained look on his face. One of his followers reacted instead. The man lunged for the young nobleman, and the two men fell onto the ground. A portion of the copper coins shot out and sliced the horse. Fresh blood erupted from the wound, coating Su Lingyan's face red. Ping! Su Qian slammed into the horse with his shoulder. The muscular horse was knocked a few meters back. A red streak decorated the green flagstone street. People hid away to watch the unfolding drama. Su Qian pulled Su Lingyan into his embrace. He noted the fear on her face and consoled her, "Don't be scared. I'm here." The little bean's lips trembled. Then, as if the fog had lifted from her mind, Su Lingyan sobbed. The men abandoned Su Lingyu and rushed over to the young nobleman. Su Qian took this moment to hand Su Lingyan over to her sister. He muttered softly, "Get to the Changle County courts. Sound the gong and tell them I sent you. Get Constable Wang to send someone to Zoo of the Armed Guards on Huangling Street. He'll look for your father. Go." Su Lingyu locked eyes with Su Qian for a moment, then she carried her younger sister and ran. "How dare you kill my horse?" The young nobleman in an embroidered robe waved his hand and his followers surrounded Su Qian, an evil grin plastered on his face. Su Qian thought, "I want to kill you too." The white-hoofed, black-bodied stallion was a rare find. In the army, only a lieutenant general and above could ride on such a horse. Su Qian had some army knowledge thanks to his uncle and could identify the quality of the horse. In the modern era, the horse would be equivalent to a Lamborghini. Those who drove Lamborghinis were the children of the upper echelon sons of the high-ranking officials in this era. Wealth was not the ultimate symbol of power in the ancient period, status was. As if the white-hoofed, black-bodied stallion was insufficient as a status symbol, the young nobleman wore an extravagant robe with azure and violet embroidery. At his waist was a dragon carved out of white jade and a heavy-looking pouch. From his wardrobe alone, one could tell he was a man with connections. No doubt a son of a high-ranking official. Su Qian folded his hands in respect. "I'm Su Qian, the son of Su Pingzi from the armed guards. The two girls are my sisters. We did not mean any offense." Then, he swallowed his pride and anger. "To save my sister, I killed your horse by mistake. I promise to compensate you." Su Qian knew the reason behind the provocation. The young nobleman noticed Su Lingyu's unparalleled beauty and wanted to take advantage of an unchaperoned girl. Maybe he even thought of kidnapping her. After spending a month in the county courts, he had heard many stories about the young nobleman's arrogant and barbaric behavior. Kidnapping women was not below them, so was putting civilians' lives on the line. To placate the commoners, they would make threats and promises. The families who were unwilling to settle would be executed. The plebeians were not worth dismissing a high-ranking official of the imperial courts. Hence, the children of said officials were given a free pass in society. In the eyes of the courts, their actions were not regarded as a threat to peace. One had to be of equal or higher standing to challenge an official's son. Su Qian barely counted as the second generation of an official. Su Pingzi was a seventh-ranked, green-robed official. The young nobleman had picked on the children of an official. The courts would have to take the case into consideration. Connections in Jingzhou City ran deep. The young nobleman was surprised. "Su Pingzi? The one who lost the tax silvers?" "Yes." Su Qian breathed a sigh of relief. After a moment's thought, the young nobleman's face darkened. He ordered his men. "Cripple him but let him live. Is this man crazy?" Su Qian nearly let out a string of profanities. The men were all practicing martial artists. They each pulled out a dagger. In Jingzhou City, A person could not carry a sword if he was not an official wearing the official uniform. The offender would receive 80 lashes and a fine of 100 silver taels if he did so. A group of people brandishing swords would instantly be executed. However, the law said nothing about daggers, and the group clearly knew about the loophole. The 5 men were martial artists who had trained in combined assaults. 2 men rushed forward with their daggers drawn. Su Jian caught their wrists and was about to strike when another 2 men came at him from his sides. The man who had pushed the young nobleman off his steed was flying toward Su Jian with his knee raised. Su Jian was forced to release the men to defend himself. Thud. The flying knee struck against Su Jian's arms. A jolt of pain shot through his body. The 2 men at his side struck out with their daggers. One missed, but the other drew blood from Su Jian's waist. The young nobleman said with a ghoulish grin, "Sever the tendons in his limbs." Su Jian glanced at the nobleman but stayed silent. He was analyzing the situation. The men are at the refinement stage but none of them are at maximum refinement. I can take them one-on-one. They're winning because they've trained for combined assaults. The daggers were back. Su Jian employed the close quarters combat techniques from his past life and pretended to be losing steam. Whereas in reality, at maximum refinement, his physical energy was boundless. However, he did not want others to know his true strength lest he misses the opportunity. The young nobleman was frustrated. His men still struggled to capture Su Jian. Standing a distance away, he shouted mockingly, "Kneel, kowtow, and call me your elder. Then, I'll let you go." Su Jian shouted his response, "Elder, your grandmother tastes good." Angered that his teasing backfired, the young nobleman screamed, "Kill him!" Thunk. Su Jian's fist clashed with the strongest fighter among the 5 men. Then, Su Jian pretended he was too weak to fight and staggered backward. The other 4 men noticed his retreat and encircled him. At that moment, the stone beneath Su Jian's feet cracked. The tension in the muscles of his lower body was released and he shot toward the man on his left. Blood rose to the man's throat. His sternum was broken. The men were not expecting Su Jian to hide his abilities, hence they were unprepared when he broke out. However, Su Jian did not escape. He ran straight toward the young nobleman. Fear registered on the young nobleman's face. Su Jian had one hand around his throat and another in his gut. He had punched the young nobleman. The young nobleman was hunched over like a prawn, vomit dripping from his mouth. Su Jian continued the onslaught until the young nobleman collapsed onto the ground, arms hugging his stomach. The fire in Su Jian's chest slowly diminished and he stopped the violence. He shouted at the approaching men, "Stand still, or else I'll kill him." The followers did as they were told. "Good, very good. Do you know who I am?" The young nobleman raised his head. There was venom in his eyes. Su Jian stepped on the nobleman's head, making him cry out in pain. The young nobleman's face hit the ground and was smeared with his own vomit. "Let me teach this nobleman a lesson. Even the ordinary man has a temper, and when angered, bloodshed ensues," Su Jian warned darkly. The 2 young men locked eyes. At that moment, a group of uniformed constables arrived with a dozen civilian guards. Constable Wang was at the head of the group. He was furious to hear that Su Jian was being bullied. However, his face froze when he saw the young nobleman in the embroidered robe. A second later, he regained his senses and shouted, "Who dares threaten the peace of Changle County?" A street fight in the administrative region. Su Jian released the young nobleman when he saw his colleagues had their swords drawn and the men surrounded. The young nobleman commanded, "Arrest him. I want him to be cut into pieces." Constable Wang pretended to not hear the nobleman's order and said, "Arrest all of them." He played his role as the uncivilized low-level official. The young nobleman's attempts to clarify his identity went unattended. After a while, the young nobleman gave up trying, choosing to believe the constables were uncultured fools. The group made their way to the Changle County courts. Constable Wang hung back and walked alongside Su Qian. Eat up. That man isn't an easy case. Do you have any idea? Constable Wang shot Su Qian a scathing look. Like I had a choice. Su Qian asked in a low voice, have you called in my uncle? They talked as they walked and the county courts appeared moments later. Chapter 23. An arrest by the Ministry of Justice. As Su Qian stepped into the county courts, he heard a choked sob. Brother. Su Lingyu, who was dressed in a green silk dress, was crying. Tear tracks marred her face and her eyes were puffy, but she still looked beautiful. Su Lingyan was not with her, she was possibly being held in one of the side halls. Su Qian composed himself and nodded at Su Lingyu. Magistrate Zhu was seated at the judge's desk, having been notified of the news beforehand. The bailiffs dragged in the parties involved. The county magistrate recognized the angry young nobleman. Magistrate Zhu rose from his seat in surprise. Isn't that nobleman Zhou? How is Assistant Minister Zhou? The young nobleman yanked his arm from the bailiff's grip and dusted the sleeves of his extravagant robe. Ignoring Magistrate Zhu's question, he pointed at Su Qian and said, this man made an attempt on my life while we were walking along the streets. He must be punished. I see. A fake smile was plastered on Magistrate Zhu's face. He turned around and ordered sharply. Fast hands Su Qian. Get over here. Su Qian stomped over. Bastard. Why did you threaten the son of Assistant Minister Zhou from the Ministry of Revenue? Are you dumb? Magistrate Zhu gave Su Qian a harsh kick. Then, he smiled at the young nobleman. Nobleman Zhou, this is a dispute between fellow sons of officials. We're all family. Please have some mercy and forgive this fool for his transgressions. Beyond the crowd, Su Lingyu watched the ongoing trial. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she witnessed her cousin endure the scolding. Red-nosed and puffy-faced, Su Lingyu still looked prettier than most girls. An assistant minister's son and from the Ministry of Revenue, Su Qian's hopes dimmed. In the courts of Daifeng, an official's power was not solely based on his rank but his background and authority. First and second-ranked officials were numerous but only a handful were truly powerful. The ministers and assistant ministers of the 6 ministries were among the handful. A fight involving the assistant minister of Revenue's son was not a small matter. Don't try to trick me. If you don't officially arrest him, I'll do it myself. Nobleman Zhou turned to his men and ordered. Pin him down. He did not believe the bastard would dare to fight back in the courts. Magistrate Zhu's deep voice boomed. Those who commit acts of violence in the county courts will be executed, no questions asked. The bailiff stepped forward. The standard-issue swords were held at the necks of the nobleman's followers. The civilian guards had their staffs raised in preparation for a fight. Nobleman Zhou's finger stabbed at Magistrate Zhu's nose as he shouted, You dare touch my men! Please do not misunderstand, Nobleman Zhou. I am but an officer of the courts. I'm simply following the law. The easygoing smile was still on the county magistrate's face as he wiped away the nobleman's saliva. Here I have a formal accusation by Su Lingyu against you. It says you endangered the people with your horse riding and harassed the daughter of a noble house. Magistrate Zhu had some cards up his sleeves. This particular tactic was useful for de-escalating a situation. However, he did not expect the accused would be the Assistant Minister of Revenue's son. The young nobleman huffed incredulously. Was anyone hurt from my horse riding? Harassment. You can ask the people on the streets, I did not lay a hand on the girl. Magistrate Zhu folded the piece of paper and stowed it in his sleeve. Perhaps the girl had mistaken you for the perpetrator. Damn, Magistrate Zhu is giving in. I need to come up with something. If things turn sour, I can escape but my uncle's family will be implicated. Su Qian was anxious. While they were both sons of officials, there was a significant difference in their social standing. An official of the armed guards was nothing compared to the Assistant Minister of Revenue. Despite the trouble he was in, Su Qian did not regret his actions. He refused to stand by and let others trample on him and his family. The cogs in his mind turned. He noticed one of nobleman Zhou's followers left the county courts. Magistrate Zhu made no move to stop him. Su Qian's heart sank deeper. He edged nearer to Constable Wang and said softly, "Constable Wang, I think I'm in a bind. Can you do me a favor? Speak." The head constable and Su Qian had become good friends in the past month. They often visited the playhouse and drank together. It was a bond forged through shared interests. "Can you lend me a silver tael?" Constable Wang searched his body and gathered a handful of broken silvers that came up to less than a tael. Su Qian pocketed the money and said, "Ride to my house. Beside my bed, in the drawer, there's a blue book. Make sure you take the blue-covered one." His diary was a yellow-covered book. "Take the book to Lady Kwei of the Imperial Astronomers. Tell her I'm in danger and require assistance." Imperial Astronomers? Doubt crossed Constable Wang's face. Would I be allowed in? It was akin to asking a commoner to enter the imperial palace. He dared not approach such a distinguished place. Su Qian knew Constable Wang would be reluctant. "If something happens to me, no one will pay back your silvers." Constable Wang's eyes widened. "Help me with this and I promise you my next month's salary." "Su Qian, you little sh*t." Constable Wang rushed out of the county courts to run the errand. When Su Pingzi got news of the fight, he borrowed a horse from a colleague and headed for the Chang'an County courts. He stepped across the threshold and entered the main court. He was greeted with the sight of his crying daughter, bailiffs with their swords drawn, and a bunch of followers. Su Pingzi turned his focus to his daughter. What happened? The appearance of her savior made Su Lingyu sob even louder. She told her father about the incident. When Su Pingzi heard about the nobleman's attempt to trample his youngest daughter, his eyes twitched while his expression darkened. If it weren't for Big Brother, Ling Yan would have been dead. Ninji and Su Pingzi searched for his nephew among the bodies. He shut his eyes for a few seconds, then told his daughter, "Go and take care of Ling Yan. Don't come until I get you." After ensuring his daughter was gone, Su Pingzi walked to the front of the crowd. He stared at the young nobleman dressed in an embroidered robe. "Nobleman Zhou, can this matter be settled peacefully?" The young nobleman saw the murderous intent in Su Pingzi's eyes and was reminded of Su Qian's warning. The words of anger died in his mouth. "Su Pingzi of the armed guards, if the nobleman decides to pursue the matter, will you drench this court in blood?" A voice rang out. An elderly man entered the main court. He was dressed in a blue gown with gold accents on the sleeves and collar. Jade accessories were strung across his waist. His hair was mostly white and his face was gaunt. Despite his age, his gaze was hawk-like. When he was done speaking, he had arrived before the courts. The young nobleman was glad to see the elderly man. "Elder Chen. It hurts my heart to see you injured. I watched you grow up. Tell me, which bastard laid a hand on you?" The blood crusted on the young nobleman's ear made the elder furious. "I've told your father many times to get you a Qi-trained expert, but he refuses because you like to get into trouble. But so what? At least your safety is guaranteed." Su Pingzi was in a dangerous situation. His body was locked in by a Qi pressure. As if a snake was coiled around his body, his muscles tensed. This feeling was eerily similar to when he was fighting in the war. The elder was a divinity-trained expert. Magistrate Zhu coughed and said, respectfully, "You're..." The elder interrupted. "No, I am just an old servant in the Zhou manor. I do not deserve Magistrate Zhu's respect. You're being too modest." Even the household staff of a high-ranking official was deemed important. As a seasoned court official, Magistrate Zhu knew better than to disrespect the elderly man. This whole thing was just a misunderstanding. The inspections are upon us and I believe peace is what we ultimately want. What do you say? The elderly man chuckled coldly. A few insignificant officials will not affect the assistant minister's inspections. The Zhou family has always been subservient to the crown. The matter shall be handled according to the empire's laws. Initially, the audience did not understand what the elderly man meant. Then, loud footsteps sounded outside the main court. A squad of armored soldiers stomped into the main court. Leading the group was a green-robed official. A white pheasant was sewn onto his uniform. The official glanced around the room and announced, "The Ministry of Justice is making an arrest. Those not involved, please step back. Anyone who interferes will be prosecuted under the same crime." A moment later, the fifth-ranked official smiled at Nobleman Zhou. "May I know who is the criminal?" Nobleman Zhou pointed at Su Qian and said, "Lock this mad dog up." The fifth-ranked official waved his hand. "Arrest him." The armored soldiers rushed forward and arrested Su Qian. Su Pingzi asked, "What crime has my nephew committed?" "I will decide whether a crime has been committed." The fifth-ranked official said, "As an officer of justice, I will see that this case is tried fairly and meticulously." There were more words Su Pingzi wanted to say, but Magistrate Zhu held him back. "Take him." Chapter 24. The Blue Book. Su Qian was quickly removed by the men from the Ministry of Justice. The white-haired elder released the chi pressure and Su Pingzi regained his ability to move freely. The elder took the young nobleman's arm and said, "Let me take you back to the manor and get you bandaged up." Nobleman Zhou followed the elder and muttered, "I want him dead." "Understood. I'll make the necessary arrangements." The elder shot him a gentle smile. "No, I want to witness it with my own eyes." "As you wish." They took their men and left the county courts. Su Pingzi's breath was laborious as if he had been drowning just minutes ago. His clothes were soaked with sweat. "I want to lodge a formal accusation before the emperor." Su Pingzi forced out the words. "You won't be granted an audience with the emperor. The imperial palace is forbidden grounds. An official of the armed guards wouldn't be allowed entrance." Magistrate Zhu sighed. "Forget about it?" "No, no." Panic and despair gripped Su Pingzi. Magistrate Zhu spent a moment thinking. "I think your best option is to find Siju. He's the White Deer Academy's candidate for imperial examinations. Perhaps he'll know of a solution." Although the White Deer Academy had been losing ground in the courts, it did not mean its scholars were witless and powerless. They were the disciples of a sage. Their purpose was to enlighten and educate others. It was why Su Zinian was able to escape banishment. Constable Wang arrived at the tallest building in Jingzhou City, the observatory. No guards manned the entrance, but he saw no people milling about the area. The observatory was a curious place, filled with all sorts of wonder and surprise. The principal imperial astronomer studied the stars and established the passage of time. He was a man who could speak to the heavens. The imperial astronomers had alchemists who invented tools and materials that had seen widespread use throughout the empire. Among all the disciplines, the imperial astronomers were the most revered by the common folk. Hence, none dared to approach their living quarters. Constable Wang had to fight the urge to turn tails and ride back to the county courts. With the fear of the unknown weighing on his heart, he tied his horse to the pillar at the entrance and walked up the steps. The base of the observatory was 6 meters high, taller than a single-story house. On the first floor, an anxious Constable Wang entered a room with columns of circular holes in the walls. The holes allowed sunlight to illuminate the room. Dust motes floated in mid-air, shimmering in the light. Constable Wang saw rows of medicine cabinets and a group of young people clad in white having a heated discussion. A person was reading a scroll while another was sleeping sprawled across the table. Someone was cooking medicinal herbs. Rumor had it that every member of the imperial astronomers was a medical expert and their services were free of charge. Constable Wang believed the rumors after witnessing the first floor of the observatory. "Who are you?" someone called out. One of the white-robed disciples noticed Constable Wang's presence and approached him. The observatory was not guarded, but few dared to enter unless they were severely ill and wanted to try their luck. Constable Wang swallowed his spit and stuttered awkwardly. I'm the head constable in Changle County Courts. And the white-robed disciple said nothing. The disciple had a piercing gaze that made Constable Wang uncomfortable. A part of him wanted to abandon Su Qian and leave this place. He made an effort and said, "I'm here for Lady Kwei. Sister Kwei." The white-robed disciple evaluated the constable and saw that he was empty-handed. "You wish to see Kwei, but you brought no food. Why do you wish to see her?" Constable Wang fished out the blue book and showed it to the white-robed disciple. "A friend of mine said to pass a message to her. Su Qian is in danger and requires assistance. And this book." The white-robed disciple flipped through the pages and tried to decipher the chicken scrawl. Uninterested, the disciple closed the book. "Sister Kwei is currently away. You can either wait here or come back later. Or I can help you pass on the book. Thank you for your help." Constable Wang took the offer, glad to leave the observatory. "What was that all about?" another white-robed disciple asked when he saw the retreating figure of the head constable. "He's a head constable looking for Sister Kwei. Must be something urgent. Here, send this book to the 7th floor and let Brother Song have a look." Song Qing was a 6th-rank sorcerer, the brightest in alchemy. He was the 4th disciple of the principal imperial astronomer. To the public, every member of the imperial astronomers could claim to be a disciple of the principal imperial astronomer. However, the principal imperial astronomer had only ever personally taught 6 disciples. They were known as the 6 apostles. The other disciples were technically disciples of the 6 apostles. Chu Kwei was the youngest of the apostles and had yet to take a disciple. Song Qing had just recently returned to Jingzhou City and heard about the case of the missing tax silvers. He had taken up the research of the fake silver transmutation under the coaxing of his disciples. The alchemists who had been slaving away day and night were incredibly grateful for Song Qing's arrival. Another failure. Even Brother Song is having trouble. Hush, Brother Song will succeed. The beginning of every alchemy process requires countless trials. Once Brother Song discovers the technique, the imperial astronomers will have one more skill to add to our repertoire. After working 24 hours, Song Qing clasped his hands. "Everyone, silence. I need to think." Despite having no rest, the fire in Song Qing's eyes glowed brightly. Some might even say they were brighter. As a passionate alchemist, he was willing to take on the challenge. The salt concentration was not the issue. After many rounds of trial, he concluded the flame had to be controlled to melt the salt but not boil it. As for the lightning, Song Qing sighed. He had a vague idea about the problem but had no grasp of voltage. He could only repeat the process multiple times and control the strength of the lightning. The person who discovered the process of making fake silver from the common salt is a genius. Song Qing longed to have an intellectual exchange with the inventor. He believed a personal breakthrough was imminent after a discussion with such an enlightened mind. At that moment, a white-robed disciple appeared on the 7th floor where alchemists gathered. The white robe was the standard uniform of the imperial astronomers. Their specialty was designated by the embroidery on their chest. An alchemist would have a kill embroidered. This disciple had a herb embroidered on his chest. He was a 9th-rank sorcerer practicing medicine. A head constable came for Sister Kwei and left a message. "Su Qian is in danger and requires assistance." It sounded urgent, so I came to send word. Maybe her friend needs help. Su Qian, the name sounded familiar to Song Qing. What else did he say? The disciple handed over the blue book. He left this book. Song Qing flipped to the first page and was nearly blinded by the illegible handwriting. The man's penmanship is atrocious. The book began with a preface. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. Edward Elric. Chapter 25. Rescue Squad. Equivalent exchange. Songqing felt a jolt of lightning strike his mind and soul. He believed this was how scholars felt when they came across philosophical poems. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. Songqing muttered under his breath, "Yes. That's correct." Whenever he successfully produced something, the materials would disappear or transform into a side product. It was a phenomenon that few noticed, and those who did never bothered to think deeper. The mentor had said alchemy lies in transformations, not transfigurations. Equivalent exchange, that's what it means. The simple quote elicited a shudder from the alchemy fanatic. When the intense feelings died down, Songqing began to decipher the unknown words. Edward Elric. Was it a name? It sounded nothing like what he had known. Perhaps it was a secret word? A secret language of alchemy. He could not make sense of the words. The mystery haunted him. Songqing took a deep breath to calm down. He flipped the page and spent all his mental focus deciphering the ugly handwriting. The book's main text began with the words, "Entering the world of alchemy." Was this an introductory lesson to alchemy? Ridiculous. Songqing thought. Alchemy knowledge had always been taught through words and examples. The gifted could join their ranks after 1.5 years of practice, while the untalented could spend 35 years learning and still achieve nothing of note. To this date, the imperial astronomers had never issued any standard education material. Doubt needled at his heart, but the profound quote from the previous page convinced him to read on. Chapter 1. There exist many natural phenomena in the world that embody the transmutation and transformation of matter, hidden from the naked eye. Matter interactions are all around us. These can be classified into chemical changes and physical changes. Songqing studied the text and fell into deep thought. What is chemistry? What is an atom? What am I reading? How is it that I can read the characters and yet understand nothing? When I had the chance to read the Confucian scripture, I could at least glean some things. This alchemy book gave me nothing. Although Songqing struggled to understand the contents, his intuition told him the blue book was one of its kind. It spoke about the basic building blocks of the world, the atoms and its arrangements. Songqing felt a shiver down his spine. He felt the urge to destroy the book. The knowledge it contained was too obscure and could be dangerous in the wrong hands. However, his heart was tempted by the forbidden fruit. Curiosity was the driving force of advancement. Silence fell over the red room. The disciples in white exchanged looks but made no sound. The expressions that flashed across Songqing's face worried them. He must be thinking about some forbidden experiments that'll shock the world. You're right. Last year, he tried to transmute a cat's flesh into a tree. His theory was that a beheaded creature could still regrow. He was in isolation for a month when the principal imperial astronomer found out. Songqing was immersed in the blue book. Fear was mixed with enthusiasm as he perused the pages. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. The fake silver transmutation process was described in detail. Step 1. Filter the salt water to obtain pure sodium chloride, pure salt. Step 2. Evaporate the water to obtain the sodium chloride crystals. Melt the crystals at 800 degrees Celsius. Step 3. Pay attention. This step will determine the outcome of the transmutation process. Finally, the question that had plagued Songqing and his disciples for many days will be answered. A miraculous book. Songqing drank in the words hungrily. Realizing he was at the end of the page, he quickly turned the paper. Emptiness. The page was empty. There was nothing written on the pages to come. Where was the third step? Who wrote this book? Songqing wanted to chop the author into pieces for releasing a half-written book like this. He was downright frustrated. Songqing's jaw was agape as his mind went blank. After some time, he asked, "Who delivered the book?" "Wasn't paying attention. Didn't hear. I forgot." The answers were surprisingly honest. Songqing descended the stairs. He found the disciple who delivered the book and questioned him. The blue book was an exchange offer, Songqing concluded. His disciples came running after him. Brother Song, what's going on? Is there something wrong with the book? An intense expression was on Songqing's face as his eyes swept past every disciple in the room. Listen up, this is an opportunity for the imperial astronomers to rise above the clouds and achieve greatness. With this, alchemy will herald a brilliant future. Nearby the sheep's pavilion, 2 horse carriages made their way down the path. The carriages held the 2 established Confucian scholars who had finally ceased their quarrel. Su Zinian and his peers trailed behind the carriages on their horses. I shouldn't have told the truth. Su Zinian regretted his words. The argument between the 2 elders had nearly escalated into a brawl when Su Zinian spoke up. Honestly, this whole argument is over a dedication poem that might last the turn of the century. His frankness gave rise to awkwardness. Although his remark stopped the fight from happening, the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. Su Zinian pondered about his manners. Mother is right, I have to be more tactful with my words. His fingers rubbed the recently acquired jade accessory. He smiled and looked upon the horizon. A galloping horse was heading their way. Moments later, Su Zinian recognized the silhouette of the rider. It was his father. Sensing trouble, he nudged his horse forward. Father, why are you here? As the question left his mouth, Su Zinian frowned. Up close, he saw the panic and distraught written all over his father's face. Su Pingzi summarized the events that happened. Assistant Minister Zhou Sun harassed Su Lingyu, nearly trampled Su Lingyan with his horse. Su Jian was dragged to the Ministry of Justice. Su Zinian felt the blood rush to his head. Little Nian, your brother's life depends on you. Father, stay calm. Ideas flashed through his mind and Su Zinian turned his horse around. He rode onto the path of the horse carriages and called out, Master! Elder Mubai! Please hear me out. The drapes of the carriages opened and the 2 elders poked their heads out. What's the matter? My brother is in trouble. I wish to request for your assistance. Su Zinian narrated the events to Zhang Zhen and Li Mubai. Zhang Zhen's eyes were wide when he asked, This is the man who crafted the poem we heard. The elder's voice was grave. Su Zinian nodded and replied, Yes. Before Zhang Zhen could continue, Li Mubai cut in from the other carriage. Siju, leave the matter to me. You and your mentor can head back to the academy. Zhang Zhen huffed and retorted, Bystanders should head back. I will personally handle my students' problems. Su Pingzi was glad to witness his son's influence with the elders of the White Deer Academy. Agitated, Su Zinian said, My brother is at the Ministry of Justice. Please hurry, his life is at stake. It was not the time for a squabble. Author's note, the poem dedicated to Yang Gong is a complete 7-character quatrain, a 7-character poetry format. The 7-character octave has 4 lines, while a quatrain has 2 lines. As the earlier chapters won't be re-edited, this footnote will serve as a clarification. Chapter 26. Virtues. Li Mubai waved his hand. The coachman was lifted by a magical wind and set down beside the road. The established Confucian scholar took hold of the reins and uttered gently, You are a horse bred for 1,000 miles. An astonishing transformation was happening. The ordinary brown horse let out a long and loud whinny. Beneath the brown coat, cords of muscles flexed and rippled. In a blink of an eye, the ordinary horse doubled its size and took off. A trail of dust followed Li Muibai's carriage. Zhang Zhen grunted. Get off. He set his coachman down by the road and took the reins. You are a strong horse bred for 1,000 miles, and you have 6 legs. A similar transformation happened. The black horse's muscles bulged and stretched over its growing frame. The main difference was this horse had its abdomen ripped open as bones, nerves, and muscles assembled into 2 additional legs. The 6-legged black horse kicked up a cloud of dust as it galloped away. Within moments, It caught up to Li Muibai's carriage. "Oh, you shameless man! Six-legged horses do not exist in nature!" Li Muibai shouted. Zhang Zhen replied, "It does if I say so." "Fine. Then, my horse will have 8 legs. You're so set on stealing my disciple, aren't you? My carriage is light as a paper, the winds can pick it up." As Zhang Zhen's words fell, a wind blew. His carriage floated along with the breeze and pulled ahead of Li Muibai's carriage. Unwilling to admit defeat, Li Muibai called out, "My carriage can ride the clouds." A white cloud manifested beneath the wheels of Li Muibai's carriage and carried the vehicle into the air. The scene made Su Pingzi's jaw drop. When the two carriages faded into the distance, he wet his lips and said, "Scholars are truly big talkers." Su Zinian stared into the sky and muttered, "Those are not boasts. They're demonstrating the fifth-ranked Confucianism, virtue." It was also known as literary chaos, dubbed by a drunk principal imperial astronomer. Su Jian ended up in a cell with monocles around his wrists and ankles. He sat on a disintegrating straw mat and leaned back against the cold wall. He was being held captive in the Ministry of Justice. The awful smell of humidity and rot brought back memories of his first days in this ancient world. From the case collections, Su Jian knew such harassment cases were not out of the ordinary. Such trivial matters would never reach the ears of the emperor. Only matters of great import would be brought up to the emperor's court. Inspections are abound. Aren't the Zhou family worried this would be used against them? Su Jian exhaled. A quick death to me and a threat to my uncle and his family would clear this mess up. I admit I was wrong about the middle class. Although life is comfortable, an encounter with the upper echelon can easily change everything. To have a respectable life, one has to gain authority and power. Clank. The metal door opened and footsteps echoed in the corridor. A jailer appeared before Su Jian's cell with 2 armed and armored soldiers. "It's your last meal," the jailer said with a mocking grin. He opened the door to Su Jian's cell and stepped back. "Get out." The 2 soldiers had their hands firm on their weapons. Their expressions suggested they would not hesitate to deliver violence. Despite the special monocles around his wrists and ankles, Su Jian's captors were cautious. The man was a martial artist at maximum refinement. In desperation, he could lash out and seriously injure them. "Please cooperate. You don't want us to sever your tendons and drag you out." Su Jian stood for a moment before getting up on his feet. In the Ministry of Justice, Minister Sun was at his desk sorting through the mountainous piles of scrolls and books. Suddenly, he had the urge to look out the window. As he stared out, he saw 2 silhouettes in the distance. As they neared the building, he could see that they were horse carriages. One rode the wind while the other rode the clouds. The 2 carriages raced each other and touched down at the same moment. The 2 horses collapsed onto the ground, their entire life force spent in the span of minutes. The horses twitched and passed away in the main courtyard of the Ministry of Justice. The guards on duty rushed toward the dying animals. Minister Sun walked out to the courtyard, a stern expression on his squarish face. He was dressed in a scarlet robe. "Brother Chunjing, Brother Jinyan, what brings you to my court?" Although the Imperial College and the White Deer Academy had a long-standing feud, having 2 established Confucian scholars in his courtyard clued Minister Sun in on the gravity of the situation. He looked expectantly at the 2 men. Zhang Zhen folded his hands and said, "The Ministry of Justice has captured a student of mine, Su Jian. I hope Minister Sun can see that he is released." A student from the White Deer Academy was arrested. "These White Deer Academy elders will protect their young even if they were in the wrong," Minister Sun said. "The Ministry of Justice doesn't arrest people without cause. Please clarify the situation." With the support of the imperial family, the Imperial College had forced the White Deer Academy into a corner when it came to court appointments. Who could they complain to if the imperial courts chose not to elect their scholars for official appointments? However, the lack of appointments did not mean the White Deer Academy was a pushover. After all, their academy held the path of Confucianism, the holy grail to all scholars in the realm. The established Confucian scholars were famed for defending their students, therefore unless there was a violation of the law, the ministry officials would never arrest a Confucian scholar. Before the Confucian elders could speak, a few bailiffs came running into the courtyard. "Minister Sun, the imperial astronomers are here. We couldn't hold the white robes back." Minister Sun and the officials turned around to find the white robes gathering inside the courtyard. The leader was a man with a kill symbol embroidered on his white robe. He had bushy eyebrows, a prominent nose, and persistent dark circles around his eyes. He was the fourth disciple of the principal imperial astronomer Song Cheng. The show of force made Minister Sun scowl. "Charging into the Ministry of Justice is an offense. Retreat while you have the chance." Song Cheng stood firm and bowed with hands clasped before him. "Minister, we are here for a prisoner of yours." The request was similar to that of the Confucian elders. Intrigued, Minister Sun asked, "Who?" "Su Jian, the man who was wrongly arrested today." It was the same man. Who was the Su Jian? To be coveted by the White Deer Academy and the imperial astronomers, the man must be a saint and a genius. In Daifeng, no one wished to get on the bad side of the principal imperial astronomer. Even the Confucians of the White Deer Academy swallowed their pride when they were mocked by the drunk sorcerer. "What's going on? Who is Su Jian? You missed the news. Remember the missing tax money? Su Jian is the person who solved it." "But the man is a martial artist, why would the Confucians and the imperial astronomers be interested in him? Odd, why did we arrest him?" Whispers traveled among the officials in the Ministry of Justice. Minister Sun summoned an official to his side. "Did we arrest someone by the name of Su Jian today?" The official answered and quickly left. A moment later, he came back with a stack of official documents. "There is no record of that name in the scroll," the official reported. Minister Sun's expression darkened. "Who arrested the man?" "That I know." The official scanned the crowd and spotted his target. "Officer Huang." All eyes turned to the green-robed official who was named. Officer Huang had just returned to the Ministry of Justice and enjoyed a cup of tea. Before he could reap the rewards from helping Assistant Minister Zhou and his son, his deed was revealed to the whole ministry. Chapter 27. Release 1. Minister Sun's pupils narrowed. Officer Huang felt as if he had fallen into ice water. His skin crawled as he approached the minister in trepidation. "Minister Sun, the matter was urgent and I failed to obtain the arrest warrant beforehand." The arrestee was a martial artist, the son of Su Pingzi of the armed guards. There was a chance he could escape. Officer Huang was not a loyal man. With the minister just 6 feet away from him, he quickly shifted the blame to someone else. Nobleman Zhou sent his man to make a formal accusation. He accused the man of assault and blood spill. All this was witnessed by the public. As the situation was critical, I decided to go ahead with the arrest to avoid losing the suspect. Officer Huang told the truth. There was no point in lying when the imperial astronomers and the White Deer Academy elders were present. Fighting in public was a crime with a 50-lash punishment. Other than the missing arrest warrant, everything else was according to the law. In the Ministry of Justice, there were many instances of arrest without warrant. The white robes from the imperial astronomers frowned. Li Muibai and Zhang Zhen exchanged a look. Li Muibai took a step forward and intoned, "The sage calls for the gentleman to speak truthfully." "Lubed up, lubed up." Officer Huang felt his heart rate pick up. Blood rushed to his face as regret gnawed at his chest. He hated his lying self. His mind screamed in objection to his reprehensible behavior. His mouth betrayed his will and spat out the words. "Nobleman Zhou wants Su Jian to die in the jail cell of the Ministry of Justice as revenge. I wanted to earn favor." The confession made his heart lighter. A sweat-covered Officer Huang collapsed onto the ground. A collective gasp was heard. The dozen or so officials who were in the courtyard stared at Officer Huang. Looks of disdain, disappointment, and delight were abound. Utterly shameless. I shall petition for your impeachment immediately, the justice advisor said. The fifth-ranked Confucianism, Virtue's Minister Sun maintained his composure. He took one look at the pale and dumbfounded Officer Huang and ordered. Pass on my message. Release Su Qian. The heavy clanking of monocles accompanied Su Qian on his journey to the interrogation room. Within the room sat Nobleman Zhou. He had changed into an indigo robe that was well insulated but not bulky. The young nobleman sat with one leg up on the chair. A white cloth was tied around his injured ear. The slender old man was still dressed in his blue gown with gold accents. He stood beside the young nobleman. His hawk-like eyes followed Su Qian's every move and his murderous intent was barely contained. Two jailers stood beside the collection of torture instruments, thrilled to witness Su Qian's demise. The young nobleman waved his hand and one of the jailers tossed a piece of paper before Su Qian. Nobleman Zhou gave Su Qian a scornful look. Two paths: sign the confession or experience the pleasures of all these torture instruments, then sign the confession. Su Qian schemed through the confession and got the gist. Changle County Court's fast hands. Su Qian got into an argument with Jolie and initiated a physical fight. With intentions to kill, he caused severe injuries to Jolie. The constables arrived on the scene to arrest Su Qian. The lightest sentence for public violence against the son of an assistant minister is banishment. This man might even ask for a public execution. No way out. Su Qian turned to look at the young nobleman. Confess now to suffer less. A smirk appeared on Nobleman Zhou's face. No. I'm letting you choose the order, punishment or confession first. The jailers laughed along. That sobered Su Qian up. Nobleman Zhou enjoyed having the upper hand in conversations. The hatred and helplessness in the eyes of his enemies fueled him. He chuckled and said, How scary. Elder Chen, are the monocles secure? We don't want to risk him going mad and harming people. The gaunt-faced elder said, Rest assured. He's a mere bug that I can crush instantly. That's reassuring. Jolie stood up and walked toward the torture instruments. There are 24 torture tools here, each can cause immense pain without killing. They're used by the Ministry of Justice to obtain forced confessions. I won't give you a quick death, that'll be too kind. I hear the night squad's prison has more than 100 torture instruments. No one leaves that place alive. It's unfortunate that you'll never experience it. Su Qian's eyes were instinctively drawn to the torture instruments. There was a chair with nails, a rusty needle, a blood-stained saw. Every instrument promised a painful and bloody experience. Su Qian gulped. His face was white as a sheet. Where is Lady Kwei? Constable Wang should have gotten to her by now. Is she unwilling to help? No, the book is written in such a way no alchemist can resist. She should be hungry for the missing content. If she doesn't show up soon, I'll be a goner. Even if I survive the torture, I will definitely be disabled. Beads of sweat formed on Su Qian's forehead. He felt fear like any normal person would. Nobleman Zhou kept an eye on Su Qian and was glad to find him utterly terrified. He relished his enemy's distress and continued to say, I hear you were raised by your uncle, Su Pingzi. Your relationship must be close. I have reason to suspect this plot was construed by you and your uncle. He looked into my background. The vein on Shi Quan's temple throbbed. This Nobleman Zhou, that's not written in the confession, the jailer said. Fool, just rewrite one then. The other jailer snapped back. What are you waiting for? Write it down now. Nobleman Zhou laughed cruelly. Laughter rang out in the interrogation room when suddenly, the metal door was busted open. A jailer entered, followed by a green-robed official. The green-robed official took in the situation. Seeing Su Qian unharmed, his shoulders sagged in relief. Release the man. Finally. Su Qian could finally relax. The two jailers who were originally in the room turned to Nobleman Zhou. The young nobleman took stock of the green official robe and studied the man's face. In a disgruntled tone, he said, "We're in the middle of an interrogation." Amused, the green-robed official replied, "This is the Ministry of Justice. If Nobleman Zhou wishes to interrogate a suspect, kindly do it in the Ministry of Revenue. This is beyond your jurisdiction." Then, he commanded, "Didn't you hear me? Release the man now." Chapter 28. To smite the insignificant bug. 2. Hold on. Nobleman Zhou shouted before the jailers could uncuff Su Qian. He glared at the green-robed official. His eyes narrowed as he said, "This man assaulted and nearly killed me. I am the victim here and this is none of your business." The official before him was a fifth-ranked official, an insignificant nuisance compared to his father. However, his father had no jurisdiction over the Ministry of Justice. Nobleman Zhou tempered his language in hopes that the official would think twice about interfering with the affairs of an assistant minister's son. It was unwise to make unnecessary enemies within the courts. Unimpressed by the young nobleman's outburst, the green-robed official sneered. "I advise Nobleman Zhou to repeat those words to the Minister of Justice." Nobleman Zhou frowned. He exchanged looks with Elder Chen and the old man said, "Minister's son is on good terms with your father." The unspoken meaning was the minister would overlook trivial matters, and this was no longer trivial. Irritated by the turn of events, Nobleman Zhou followed them out of jail. If the situation was salvaged, he would get his hands on Su Qian again and make sure the man suffered. Su Qian was released from captivity. The sunlight blinded him as his pupils constricted to accommodate the brightness. He was escorted by the green-robed official to the main courtyard. There was a crowd gathered there, officials dressed in different colored uniforms, a dozen of white robes, and two sprightly Confucian elders. Su Qian also noticed two carriages with their odd-looking horses dead on the ground. The scene surprised Nobleman Zhou as well. What happened? The clanking sounds of monocles stopped. Su Qian turned around and said to the young nobleman, "Be glad that you were interrupted. Let me reintroduce myself, I'm the newest disciple of the principal imperial astronomer." Elder Chen's eyes widened. A range of expressions flashed across Nobleman Zhou's face. No way. There's no way he's the disciple of the principal imperial astronomers. However, the white robes congregating in the courtyard supported Su Qian's statement. Nobleman Zhou and Elder Chen stayed calm. Su Qian ignored his captors and took a few steps forward. After a quick scan of the crowd, he did not find Lady Kwei among the people. "Where's the pretty girl with the oval-shaped face?" Constable Wang delivered the blue book, but I don't see Lady Kwei. The alchemists of the imperial astronomers read the book and rushed to my rescue. Is she preoccupied with something else? Su Qian took a deep breath and folded his hands together. The monocles clanked loudly together as he greeted, "Good to see my brothers." Song Qing was surprised. He met Su Qian's eyes and asked, "Did you write the book?" "I don't like his eyes." Su Qian nodded. "This is not the place to talk about it. Once we leave the Ministry of Justice, Ninjian will tell you everything you want to know." Witnessing the exchange between Su Qian and the imperial astronomers, Nobleman Zhou approached Minister's son for clarification. He refused to believe the man was truly a disciple of the imperial astronomers. "Minister's son, the imperial astronomers." Minister's son glanced at the young nobleman. "They came for a prisoner." Nobleman Zhou swayed. The gaunt-faced old man's breathing picked up. Was the man truly the disciple of the principal imperial astronomer? Impossible. If that was true, the missing tax silvers case would not have seen the Su family thrown into jail. The tax silvers. Perhaps Su Qian was made a disciple after he solved the case. The man had successfully produced the fake silver without ever having an alchemy mentor. His talents must have caught the principal imperial astronomer's attention and made him an exception. Otherwise, why would the white robes come for him? At that moment, the old man noticed the two silent Confucian scholars and the odd-looking horses on the ground. He focused his gaze and recognized them as the elders of the White Deer Academy. The old man swallowed his saliva. Minister, the two Confucian elders. Minister Sun's expression betrayed nothing. They came for the same prisoner. Nobleman Zhou frowned as he looked at Elder Chen. So, you're Su Qian, a voice spoke. Su Qian turned to find a gray-robed elder with a goatee. And who are you? Another elder dressed in a blue robe appeared. He smiled as he evaluated Su Qian. I am Siju's mentor. Fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm. You're the one who wrote the poem. My apologies for not recognizing you. I am Ninjian, Su Qian said. The courtesy name was commonly used in introduction as it was taboo to address people by their given name. Not offering up one's courtesy name meant one was not interested in the friendship. The smile widened on the blue-robed elder's face. If we're done here, let us all leave the Ministry of Justice, an impatient Songqing called out. Immediately, a jailer appeared before Su Qian and unlocked the monocles. Su Qian nodded. Agreed. Smiles broke out among the imperial astronomers. They have achieved their goal and looked forward to the upcoming discussion. Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen were also in agreement. There was an intense tug of war between them and the prize had just been released. Phew. Nobleman Zhou was glad to see Su Qian leave. He was reluctant to admit it, but he was worried there would be consequences to his actions. Suddenly, Su Qian halted his footsteps. Wait. The imperial astronomers' white robes and the two Confucian elders looked at Su Qian. There's one more thing I need to handle. Su Qian took a bow and headed for Nobleman Zhou. On his way, he grabbed the wooden stocks from the jailer. Why you? What do you think you're doing? Scared witless, Nobleman Zhou staggered back. Su Qian. My father is the Assistant Minister of Revenue, don't you dare touch me. You dare to assault me in the Ministry of Justice? Minister Sun, arrest this man. Elder Chen, help me. Su Qian slammed the wooden stocks over Zhou Li's head. The wood splintered and broke. Nobleman Zhou's eyes rolled back into his head as he fell backward. Blood pooled around his hair. With a deadpan expression, Su Qian stared at the gaunt-faced old man. Kill me. Silence filled the courtyard. Why don't you kill me as you promised? Before the imperial astronomers, the justice officials, and the Confucian scholars, come on. The anger on the old man's face receded as he stood there, rooted to the ground. A near brush with death. Truly, social status played a significant role in the court of law. The law was only fair when both parties were commoners. Su Qian bathed in the warm glow of the winter sun, feeling as if he had been reborn. As he stepped out of the Ministry of Justice, two horses came galloping down the street. It was Su Zinian and Su Pingzi. They saw Su Qian among the imperial astronomers' white robes and visibly relaxed. Why are the imperial astronomers here? Su Pingzi wondered. As a martial artist at maximum chi training and a survivor of the Battle of Shanhai Pass, he did not place the imperial astronomers on a pedestal as most common folks did. Su Zinian glanced at his cousin, then sighed softly. He secured the reins of his horse and bowed before the two Confucian elders. Many thanks to my mentor and elder Mubai. Su Qian folded his hands and bowed to the imperial astronomers before quickly joining his cousin in thanking the two Confucian elders. Li Mubai said regretfully, how did a poet like you end up in jail? Ninjian, would you be interested in the ways of Confucianism? The White Deer Academy welcomes you. You barely know each other and you're calling him Ninjian. Zhang Zhen said, why yes, I will gladly take you under my wing. Su Qian was at a loss. Chapter 29. Siju, brother has been good to you. Su Qian glanced at Su Zinian, who was stone-faced. The elders' offers flatter and surprise, but I am a martial artist. I studied little when I was young, Su Qian said gingerly, wary of the unknown. It doesn't matter. Learning is a lifelong endeavor, it's never too late to start, Li Mubai said as he stroked his beard. Su Jian was truly baffled by the elder's recruitment. He had to figure out what was happening. A glance at his cousin gave him an idea. That is true. Perhaps I do have some scholarly talent to get your attention. Maybe I'll even surpass Siju. At that, Su Zinian let out an arrogant huff. My mentor and elder Mubai have their eyes on your poetry skills, like Yang Gong's farewell to Qingzhou at the Sheep's Pavilion. The outburst took Su Zinian by surprise and he averted his gaze in embarrassment. Yang Gong's farewell to Qingzhou at the Sheep's Pavilion? Yang Gong? Ah, I think I understand. The information divulged by Su Zinian was exactly what Su Jian needed to complete the puzzle. He knew what the two established Confucian scholars wanted from him. A poem was useful to spread one's name and leave one's legacy. For example, Wang Lun, a good friend of the great poet, Li Bai, had his name immortalized in Li Bai's poem which was passed down the centuries. Evidently, kissing *SS was a useful skill to have. The ancient people had it down to an art. The man went down in history. In the modern day, people kissed their dogs and girlfriends, and what did they get in return? The ancient people knew their priorities. The White Deer Academy was losing ground in the courts. Reduced court appointments meant there was a low chance the scholars would be written into the history books. Hence, Su Jian's poetry was more vital than ever. These elders. Su Jian pursed his lips. He was not happy to learn that the elders only wanted him for the poems and not his stellar character. The eager smiles on their faces did not falter. Su Jian said after a moment's thought, "Thank you for the offer. I am committed to learning and it would be impolite for me to refuse. Recently, inspiration visited me and I wrote a few good poems. I'll drop by the White Deer Academy to visit both of you once I've settled the matter at hand." Both of you. Su Jian was definitely a more tactful person than Su Zinian. Li Mubai breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Zhang Zhen had the advantage of having Su Zinian as his student. Li Mubai was worried he would not stand a chance in recruiting Su Jian. Su Jian's response was beautifully phrased. "If that is so, we shall retire to the White Deer Academy and wait for your visit," Zhang Zhen said. Then, he turned to Su Zinian. "Siju, you should do some mental cultivation. You have spent a year in enlightenment and it's about time for your breakthrough. Copy the sage's quotes 300 times and hand them to me 10 days later." Su Zinian was crestfallen. "A step, a mile," Zhang Zhen intoned. He turned around and disappeared. Li Mubai showed off his skill. He drew a circle around himself with his toes and shot Su Jian a smile. "Within the circle is the entrance of the gates." Li Mubai vanished when the sentence ended. Su Jian was amazed. "Siju, what ranks are the two elders at?" Su Zinian was still trapped in his despair, so Su Pingzi answered instead, "I believe little Nian said it's the 5th-ranked Confucianism, virtue." Su Pingzi happily shared the scene he witnessed outside the city gates with his nephew. "As long as I believe the things I said, the world will bend to my will." Su Jian was shocked. Finally, Su Zinian escaped his gloomy thoughts and glowered at Su Jian, who had set him up. The virtue state allows one to dictate rules that govern others through verbal expressions. The core skill is to influence the world with one's words, hence the skill is also known as literary chaos. Of course, not any 5th-ranked Confucian can achieve the results shown by the two elders. The two martial artists listened attentively. Su Pingzi lamented, "Every discipline has mystical powers. Only martial arts rely on brute strength and courage. Which is why it's a crude discipline." The Confucian scholar kept his judgment to himself, knowing the two older men could easily beat him up. Su Zinian felt the burning gaze of his cousin. "Brother," Su Jian said. "What? I've always been good to you. Before you say that, you should look into your heart. I have but one wish." "Go on." "In the future, when you achieve the virtue rank, Promise me this. What is it? You must say this to me. Where is the legendary beauty? The legendary beauty is around brother's waist. You pervert. Su Zinian stomped away furiously. The words by his nephew made Su Pingzi sink into contemplation. Su Jian had to swing by the observatory while Su Pingzi had to return to the Changle County courts. His daughters were still waiting there. It was Su Jian's first visit to the observatory. He clucked his tongue as he assessed the tallest building in Jingzhou City. Song Qing asked, "Have you been to the observatory?" "Nope. It's my first time." "You don't seem amazed." From Su Jian's expression, Song Qing could tell the feat of engineering had no effect on the man. To feast one's eyes on the observatory for the first time was to be stunned by the brilliance of human engineering. The base of the observatory was double the height of a normal house. The pillars were many times thicker than the ones in the imperial palace. The bricks stood taller than a human. The observatory consumed manpower, material, and money. Its annual expenditure was 1/3 of Daifeng's tax collection. The imperial astronomers took pride in the building's staggering height as they believed no one else could emulate their success. The observatory was a joint venture by the imperial astronomers, alchemists, and the Ministry of Works. The planning, design, and construction took 12 years in total. Skyscrapers are common in my world, Su Jian thought and smiled. My uncle said I was born with a calm disposition, unfazed by disasters. Maybe it's an innate ability. A glint of excitement appeared in Song Qing's eyes as he said, "I admire that. I think we'll work well together." Su Jian noted the dark circles around the man's eyes and wondered if he should have toned down his boasts. On the 7th floor of the observatory, Chu Kei sat before a table filled with a variety of dishes. She was dressed in a robe of the same shade of yellow as when she first met Su Jian. Steamed lamb, steamed bear paw, steamed deer tail, roast duck, roast chicken, roast goose. The tongue twister appeared in Su Jian's mind. Chu Kei glanced at the constable whom she had met once before and mumbled, "Did you get into trouble again?" Her stuffed cheeks ballooned comically. "You weren't here to receive my message." Su Jian had learned about the events that transpired from Song Qing. "I had an appointment with the princess." Su Jian was hungry. He took a seat at Chu Kei's table and leaned forward to grab a drumstick. Smack! Chu Kei slapped his hand away. Her large, almond-shaped eyes were pointed as she asked, "Hungry? Brother Song, why don't you take him for a meal? You guys can come back when you're done." Is this a glimpse into Su Lingyan's future? Su Jian felt something lodged in his throat and he coughed. Chu Kei ate her food. Suddenly, she asked, "How did you end up in a fight with that Joe guy?" "I was shopping with my sisters and he was attracted to my first sister." "Is your sister pretty?" "The two of you are neck and neck." "Then she must be out of this world." Su Jian met Chu Kei's eyes. The sunlight illuminated the woman's profile and her skin radiated a healthy shine. Her oval-shaped face was unblemished while her almond-shaped eyes sparkled like the stars. Su Jian rarely saw eyes as mesmerizing as hers. She would be a good match for my past self. Chu Kei licked her fingers and said, "The case of the missing tax silvers is officially closed. Do you know who's responsible for switching out the real silver tails?" Su Jian shook her head. "I'm just a lowly constable." Chu Kei met his eyes and bit down on a piece of roast duck. "Lu Chenzi of the Armed Guards and Principal Zheng Xian of the Ministry of Revenue." "And?" Su Jian raised an eyebrow. "I heard they were supported by the Assistant Minister of Revenue, Zhou Xianping." F***ing hell. Su Jian cursed in his heart. That minor detail allowed him to connect the dots. After I revealed my name, his son was adamant about my death sentence as I was the one who solved the missing tax money case and spoiled his father's plot. It was all for revenge. No, perhaps today's incident was premeditated. Assistant Minister Zhou's residence is within the inner wall. Why would his son be loitering around the markets near the Su Manor? Unless he had a purpose. If they had looked into the Su family, harassing Lingyu was possibly a bait to get me arrested, then they could do as they pleased to me. A chill ran down Su Qian's spine as he thought of what could have happened. Chapter 30. Chemistry Lesson. Su Qian's mind processed the new information. That Zhou boy is a hedonistic son of the rich. Was he acting under another person's instructions? Well, just because he's a spoiled child, doesn't mean he can't have brains. He utilized his social status to pick a fight with me and pulled strings to try to get rid of me. There were little consequences for the Zhou family. Although inspections are near, the death of a low-level official will not turn heads. A county constable can't hold a candle to the assistant minister of revenue, a third-ranked official. They did not expect me to have ties with the Imperial Astronomers and the White Deer Academy. Su Qian felt like he was walking on thin ice. I offended the assistant minister of revenue when I solved the case. Now, I'm being dragged into this mess. And to think I wanted to distance myself from the courts and become a wealthy merchant, lead a normal life with a wife and children. If it weren't for Su Zinian's poetry recital and the chemistry knowledge I wrote down a few days ago, I might have died not knowing the truth, a meaningless death. A series of coincidences allowed Su Qian to escape death. It was luck. Su Qian realized. Lady Kwei, may I know if you can read a person's fate? Chu Kwei swallowed her food and said, yes. The 8th rank is Qi Mastery. All the more flashy skills build upon it. Mentions of her own discipline perked her up and she asked excitedly, that said, do you know why the 9th rank is medicine and not Qi Mastery? Su Qian shook his head and said, can't be because all sorcerers have a heart of gold, right? Chu Kwei sat up straight and put on a serious expression. She was enjoying her chance to educate someone about sorcery. Every living thing in the world has Qi, but humans exhibit it the most. Hardships, emotions, and desires are all reflected in a person's fate. While practicing medicine, one cannot avoid the old and the sickly, life and death. Long-term exposure to such conditions will cause one to develop the clear sight. I love a woman who can't shut up. Su Qian said, can you look into my fate? Chu Kwei dabbed her lips with a handkerchief. Then, she stared into Su Qian's eyes. Bright spots appeared in her dark pupils. Placed under the clear sight, Su Qian felt his soul being touched. There were pins and needles on his spine and the experience was incredibly unsettling. A moment later, Chu Kwei's eyes returned to normal and she said, I saw faint red with black smoke. What does that mean? Red means you're involved in the courts. Faint, because you're a low-level official. The black smokes are a sign of your bad luck. I don't think you need an explanation for that. Su Qian frowned. You saw no other colors? Maybe something that signifies I'm the son of destiny. Chu Kwei let out a gasp. She could tolerate Su Qian's irreverence, but to insinuate he was chosen by destiny was going too far. You should be careful with your words. What you said can be construed as treason by others. No one but the Emperor can be the son of destiny. O mighty dragon, perhaps you should rub your eyes and try again. Or maybe she's too low-ranking. Or my luck has nothing to do with my fate. Su Qian fell into deep thought. Chu Kwei slapped away Su Qian's sticky fingers and glowered at him. Can you wait? I'll let you have the remaining food once I'm done. Su Qian surveyed the table. Half of the food was gone. He wondered how far into the pregnancy she was. Right, how is the assistant minister of revenue doing? Su Qian sat up straight and kept his eyes away from the table. The revenue advisor filed a complaint of misconduct against assistant minister Zhou, but the emperor shot it down. Chu Kwei paused for a moment, then continued saying, the two men killed themselves over the crime. So there's no evidence. The emperor could sentence anyone to death, evidence, and the voice of the people be damned. This case could be the result of political infighting, or the emperor has other plans in motion. I have too little knowledge about the imperial courts. I should get to know some people on the inside. Su Jian tried to pry the details from Chu Keiwei, but she had little to contribute. The woman had no interest in politics. My goodness, you're annoying. The imperial astronomers do not mind the matters of the courts. The endless questions irritated her to no end. Su Jian knew better than to push. I might have offended her by asking questions that she didn't have the answers to. Su Jian happily stuffed his mouth. How much did this cost? Satiated with food and wine, Chu Keiwei raised her fingers and did some calculations. No answer came. Su Jian lifted his head to look at the woman. I gave them 4 silver taels and they returned me 1 silver tael, 3 silver maces, and 60 copper coins. How much is that? Chu Keiwei asked with a frown. She looked adorable. It reminded Su Jian of a 7-year-old child learning arithmetic. Su Jian muttered, I don't know either. 1 silver tael was 8 silver maces, 1 mace was 100 copper coins. The currency conversion did not follow a strict 1:10 ratio, which complicated the calculations. Su Jian figured mathematics was not a part of Chu Keiwei's curriculum and decided to play dumb. Chu Keiwei's eyes crinkled into half-moons, acknowledging Su Jian as one of her kind. But you could count well when you were solving the case. I spent a long time thinking. Oh. You don't look very happy with the food. Chu Keiwei gave him a questioning look. No. The food tastes all right. Hey, this table is from Rhapsody Inn that serves the best food south of the city. I've had better. Chu Keiwei's eyes lit up. Su Jian said, you're invited to drop by my house if you're free. I can cook something up. In the red room, a group of white robes was gathered around the experiment, eyes locked onto Songqing's ministrations. The eggshell-thin porcelain cup was placed above the flame. Steam was rising from the cup as the water evaporated. Crystals formed at the bottom. Songqing flicked his finger and a flame wrapped around the crystals, melting them. Su Jian watched the sorcerer's performance in admiration. That would be such a great party trick. You probably can get all the girls' attention. The sodium chloride crystals melted. Songqing had a look of concentration as he braced himself for the crucial step. He had been met with countless failures at this step. Lightning. Songqing turned to Su Jian. The white robes and Chu Keiwei were also staring at the man. Su Jian's expression was neutral as he nodded. Not a word from him. That means every step to this point is correct, Songqing thought. He snapped his fingers. A faint lightning strike arced across the room and shot toward the porcelain cup. Hold your breath. Those were Su Jian's first instructions. Everyone obeyed without hesitation. Honestly, I doubt you non-humans will suffer if you inhaled the poisonous gas. Su Jian only instructed them to do so out of habit. The next scene had all the white robes in awe. Inside the porcelain cup was a silvery solid that was identical to a silver fragment. A layer of untransformed salt coated the product. So success. Brother Songqing, how did you do it? The white robes were shocked. After weeks of failure, the transformation was completed on the first try. As predicted, Lady Keiwei was also able to perform the transformation on the first try that day. It isn't luck, no, it is luck. It's because I was present on both occasions. The experiment had confirmed his suspicions. Songqing glanced at the fake silver and turned to his celebrating disciples with a look of confusion. Every step was as per what I'd done before. Bewildered, he looked to Su Jian. The surprised expression on the man's face changed into one of realization. Songqing approached the man. Su Ninjian, what is the key? The question broke Chu Keiwei's reverie and she stared at Su Jian. Heads turned to look at the man. Su Jian folded his hands and stood straight. With a smile, he said, that's a question for you to figure out. As an established alchemist, you should practice independent thinking. I believe the key point is obvious. Chapter 31. This is not taking advantage but an equivalent exchange. The key. The cogs in Songqing's mind spun at full speed. His brain searched through all the variables that differentiated the success from the failures. The initial steps were the same but the last step was crucial: the lightning. How was the lightning different? Realization struck Songqing in the chest. He exclaimed, I know. I know. Su Ninjian, you are a genius. Although you never witnessed our attempts, you knew the reason behind our failures. No, I don't, but please tell. Su Jian smiled at the rambling man. What is the key? Brother Song, did you figure it out? Brother Song, come on. This transformation has plagued me for the past month. The white-robed alchemist urged Songqing to quickly reveal his observations. Songqing let out a cough and looked at his disciples. It's the strength of the lightning strike. He turned to Su Jian for confirmation. Su Jian smiled and nodded. I call it voltage. The voltage needed to purify sodium from molten sodium chloride was 6 to 15 volts. Voltage. Songqing was stunned. He had never heard of that word being used in relation to electricity. It was an incredible piece of knowledge, just like the profound writings in the blue-covered book. One of the white robes stepped forward and bowed before Su Jian. Please enlighten us. What is this voltage you speak of? Please. The other white-robed alchemists followed suit. Standing in the corner, Chu Keiwei watched in silent envy. She was fond of being an educator, but as a 7th-ranked Feng Shui master, she was unqualified to take in students. Voltage, also known as potential difference, is the difference in the amount of energy that charge carriers have between 2 points in a circuit. Of course, none of you would understand that. Su Jian coughed and put on a stern expression. Electricity is like water, it'll flow towards a low point. Su Jian picked up a teacup and poured out the tea. The water that fell from this cup wouldn't hurt anyone, but a waterfall can break bones and take lives. The same principles apply to electricity. I call it voltage. He used a simple example to explain the concept of voltage. The white robes of the imperial astronomers entered a state of deep thought. They could not fully grasp Su Jian's words. Songqing said excitedly, is that why lightning strikes trees? Because the trees are at a lower point, the same applies to humans. A weak electricity will only cause minor paralysis, whereas a lightning strike can cause death. The lightning from the sky is like a waterfall, whereas electricity is like the water from the cup. The white robes were enlightened by Songqing's explanation. It opened their eyes to the wonders of the world. They turned to Su Jian with inquisitive looks. Huh, is that correct? I thought trees being struck down by lightning was due to water conductivity. What did my high school teacher say? Despite his unsurety, he smiled and said, you are promising. A young white-robed disciple asked curiously, was this written in that old alchemy text you found? Yes. Only I have read and researched that text. The contents in the book that I sent over were only a drop in the ocean. After a pause, Su Jian continued saying, that ancient text not only had knowledge and facts, it also contained many never seen before alchemic processes. A collective gasp sounded from the room. Su Jian chuckled and gave the white robes a promise. I have decided to share the contents of the ancient text with the imperial astronomers. Whoa! There were 20 alchemists on scene that were shaking with excitement. The blue book that I gave you was a gift in return for the rescue. As for the guidance on the fake silver transformation and the knowledge on voltage, those are not for free. The same applies to the rest of the ancient text. Su Jian intoned dramatically, never forget, the first law of alchemy is equivalent exchange. Songqing nodded. He agreed with the man's reasoning. How much do you want? Blasphemy. Su Jian deepened his voice and said, alchemy cannot be weighed in silver. There are things harder to obtain than money. In the side hall of the Changle County courts, Su Lingyu cradled her sleeping sister. She dabbed the handkerchief to her eyes as tears continued to fall. Watching the pretty girl cry, the constables of the Swift class felt their hearts break who knew Su Jian had such a beautiful sister. Even Constable Wang, who had been to the entertainment school, was charmed by the girl's appearance. The mood in the room was disheartening and the constables were of no help in lifting the spirits. Constable Wang poured a cup of tea and placed it before Su Lingyu. The girl had been crying non-stop for half a day. Women are really good criers. Please, be calm. Your father will know how to save Ninjian. The other constables chimed in with words of consolation and curses for the young nobleman. The raw emotions in the room took Su Lingyu by surprise. She did not expect her brother to have such a good relationship with his colleagues. Constable Wang noticed her surprise and smiled. Ninjian is a worthwhile man. Really? Su Lingyu's eyes widened. She sniffled and asked softly, Constable Wang, can you tell me more about my brother's case? Constable Wang sighed. He lowered his voice and said, to be frank, there are few in the courts who have clean hands. The basic decency is not troubling the common folk, but we do collect pocket money from the rich merchants. But your brother, he's good to the common folk and the merchants. Never abuses his power. After the case, I figured the Su family needed some financial help and brought him along. Constable Wang's expression went from concern to awkward to ashamed to respect. He gladly agreed to come with me, and at the end of the trip, I split the money we obtained. I found out he returned the 5 silver maces to the family. Being a goody two-shoes rarely gains you friends, but Ninjian gets along well with everyone. When trouble finds a good man like him, we can't help but jump to his defense. The head constable's words slowly changed Su Lingyu's image of her eldest brother, taller, brighter, more steadfast. Since young, Su Lingyu had always admired the scholarly Su Zinian, as education was the pillar of their society. Her mother had enforced the notion that the scholar would one day lift the Su family from obscurity. Her admiration for Su Zinian peaked when he passed the autumn imperial provincial exam. However, right after his successful candidature, the Su family was thrown into jail. Su Jian was the one who saved them from the cruel fate. Since then, Su Lingyu had paid closer attention to her eldest brother. The constables had given her a glimpse into Su Jian's personality. He was a reliable man at work, which substantiated his efforts to save his family a month ago. Su Lingyu's gratitude for her eldest brother only grew from then. Seeing Su Jian save Su Lingyan was enough to make him and Su Zinian equals in her eyes. Then, Constable Wang's praise only improved Su Lingyu's impression of her eldest brother, a stalwart man of principles to the point of surpassing Su Zinian. At that moment, the door to the side hall opened, and in came Su Pingzi and his son. They were relieved to find the girls safe. Tears streamed down Su Lingyu's face as she said, "Father, you have to save brother. I don't think I can live with myself if he's gone." Chapter 32. Su Pingzi was touched by his daughter's concern for his nephew. After 20 years of mediation, he was glad to see the relationship among the younger generation had improved despite his wife's persistent dislike for Su Jian. Su Pingzi took the sleeping Su Lingyan from Su Lingyu and said reassuringly, "Ninjian has been released. Everything's fine now." Su Lingyu did not believe her father. He would willingly lie to console his daughters. With a hint of distrust, she turned to her brother. Su Zinian said coolly, "It was a small matter." Su Lingyu believed him. Her second brother was a proud man who would not lie about serious matters. One of the low-level officials reported the news to Magistrate Zhu, who then quickly made his way to the side hall. "How did you settle the issue with Nobleman Zhou?" The news came as a surprise to Magistrate Zhu. He figured Su Jian was done for unless the young nobleman decided to rescind the charges, which was unlikely to happen. Su Zinian said, "I asked my mentor for help." "I see." Magistrate Zhu nodded. However, the courts were mostly made up of officials from the Imperial College. Everyone knew the Imperial College and the White Deer Academy were at odds with each other. Although Su Zinian's mentor was an established Confucian scholar, the Minister of Justice would not willingly release a prisoner at his behest. There would be a round of wrangling before Minister Sun would agree to a compromise. Elder Mubai was also there. A pause. And the imperial astronomers. What? Magistrate Zhu was shocked. Then, he schooled his face and said, like father and son. Congratulations. Your son's intelligence impressed the elders of the White Deer Academy and also the imperial astronomers. He has a good future ahead of him. How I wish I had a son like him. Brother has dealings with the imperial astronomers. The thought comforted Su Lingyu. She turned to stare at her brother. An unmarried girl relied on her father while a married girl relied on her husband. These were the two main pillars of a girl's life. While at home, the older brothers were also a source of support. Su Zinian shook his head and clarified, Elder Mubai came on his own accord to meet my brother. The imperial astronomers were also my brother's connections. Su Jian and elderly Mubai from the White Deer Academy. Perhaps Su Zinian pulled some strings and arranged a meeting. What about the imperial astronomers? How did a lowly constable gain an ally there? Impossible. Magistrate Zhu was perplexed. Su Jian had been working in the county courts for more than a year. The young man was quiet and predictable, with an average relationship with his peers at work. He was good at roughhousing but nothing else. However, a perceptible change had taken over the young man. He became a charming, smart talker who got along well with the other constables. Nevertheless, it did not explain his connections with the Confucian elders and the imperial astronomers. Magistrate Zhu wondered, if all this is true, Su Ningjian is not your average constable. I should treat him better. I'll get some answers from him in tomorrow's roll call. Su Lingyu's animated eyes widened in disbelief. Her mind connected the dots. It was the goodbye poem he composed for Su Zinian that gained him a favor with the Confucian elders. What about the imperial astronomers? Su Lingyu found her eldest brother to be more mysterious as the days passed. Su Jian walked with Song Qing along the corridor. The walls to his right had holes that allowed sunlight in. There were no windows in the observatory, which was regretful as the vantage point would have offered a good view. Soon, they arrived at a hidden chamber. Song Qing unlocked the room with a key and proceeded to light the candles within. A variety of artifacts were displayed in the chamber. Su Jian could make out some to be weapons while others befuddled him. Su Jian entered the room and examined the artifacts. Suddenly, he jumped back in horror. What is that? Within a large glass bottle was a weird-looking creature submerged in clear water. The creature resembled a cat, but its skin was covered with hardened tree bark. In its center was a bulging callus. The thing was alive, as evidenced by the soft pulsating callus in its abdomen. Song Qing explained, this was originally a cat. I fused it with a tree to grant it the ability to regrow. It was almost a success. If you cut off its head, it will regrow in 3 days. The only weakness is its heart. Unfortunately, the cat had morphed into a tree. It can't move or think and has to be kept in water. Su Jian stared at the man and thought, are you the devil? What do you think of it? Song Qing asked tentatively. When he saw the frown on Su Jian's face, he was disappointed. You disagree with my methods too? Su Jian schooled his expression and shook his head. Such practices have occurred to me. I pegged them as hybridization techniques, though I have to admit, your methods are a bit different from mine. Hybridization, Song Qing processed the term. His eyes lit up. I believe we should start from the small things. Hybridize creatures of the same species. For example, we can crossbreed 2 different types of cats and see the results, Su Jian said. What will that produce? A different animal? Song Qing questioned. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a better breed or a worse breed. But alchemy is all about the unknown, wouldn't you say so? Something in Su Jian's words agitated Song Qing. You called it alchemy. Alchemy. Su Qian was startled by the man's outburst. What do you mean? In my opinion, alchemy touches upon even the living. Hence, I performed the transformations on this cat. However, my mentor disagrees. He said life does not fall under the jurisdiction of alchemy, and so, he forbids any practice that involves a living creature. A masterstroke by the principal imperial astronomer. Su Qian put on a look of concentration and said, I think the matter is not black or white and only time can tell. After a moment, Su Qian continued saying, if you wish to go against the principal imperial astronomer but avoid punishment, I can give you some advice. At that point, Song Qing already regarded Su Qian as his accomplice. Go on. You can begin with plants, they are living matter but possess less vibrancy. I came across something in the ancient text that will suit your practice. Su Qian trailed off. The dramatic pause made Song Qing anxious. He glared at Su Qian with his swollen, bloodshot eyes. Come on, spill it. Brother Song has quite a collection here. The first law, Su Qian said. I know. I can give you 3 items. Based on your alchemy skills, I believe these gifts are befitting. Song Qing was not against the law of equivalent exchange. He believed it even. This crossbow is handmade by me. The transmutation process was highly difficult, making it impossible to mass-produce despite being stronger and more resistant than its iron counterpart. The crossbow string is a weave of silks procured from the poisonous six-eyed spider of the southern borderlands and the rainbow silkworm. A stealth shot can take down a chi expert's chi protection but not a martial artist at maximum chi state. But the most priceless aspect of this crossbow is its enchantment. The enchantment will only sustain 3 shots, but it'll greatly boost your attack, allowing you to damage even a divine class expert. Song Qing ended his detailed explanation. Su Qian stared at the crossbow. Was this a magic weapon? Part 2 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.